had a short closed session upstairs. We're now back to our regular agenda, and the first thing on the agenda for now is the public comment period. So if anybody would like to comment on absolutely anything, since it's budget work session.
No limitations?
No limitations on topic.
Oh.
But please identify yourself, and please try and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
I can do that. Hello, everybody. Thank you for hearing my comments. My name is Rocco Casagrande. I'm the president of the Old Tacoma Business Association and a Ward 1 resident. As many of you know, the mission of the Old Tacoma Business Association is to promote and sustain the businesses in the Central Business District of Tacoma. Why I'm here today is we're requesting an increase of our operating subsidy by $20,000. What we plan to do with that funds is do additional promotion activities to redevelop our website and essentially to use it to hire a full-time staff person, because the administrative and promotional duties that we have are exceeding our capacity. And there's a lot of need amongst the businesses. We're having more businesses come in, a lot of new businesses that need a lot of help. And we're just seeking your help to make us be able to do that.
I'm just going to reiterate that. I'm Laura Barclay. I'm co-executive director of the OTBA. As Rocco said, we've received an operating subsidy of $30,000 per year. We're requesting to increase that to $50,000, which is the equivalent of a full-time employee. The rest of our operating income we will generate through events and membership revenue to meet our overall objectives, but we believe that based on the current subsidy that we have and our current resources, we're maxed out with what we're capable of generating, and we think that the additional $20,000 will better help us meet those goals.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was suggested that I just, for the record, I can pass out just a little quick overview of what we do for the public.
Great. That would be helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And let me just check. Robin, is Councilmember Grimes participating by telephone?
Yeah, I'm on the line now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Just want to make sure.
I have a question for the OTBA representatives, which is, could they please update us on the status of a funding request from the District of Columbia government?
So we have a meeting pending with Muriel Bowser's staff. It is not scheduled yet, but it is an ongoing effort that we are pushing hard on.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make one little teeny comment?
Yeah, but just remember our discussion on Tuesday.
I know it won't be a 15-minute one. I know you all aren't always at the council meetings, but I have sung your praises almost every week. You've done an amazing job this past year with what funding that you've had, and we're here in the springtime, and it's last week the RHOP. We've got Earth Day. I mean, it just keeps going on and on. The buildings are being filled with businesses, and it's truly exciting.
Thank you.
That's my take.
Yeah,
right?
we appreciate it. But in a way, we're victims of our own success, in that one of the reasons we're seeking an increase in operating subsidy is our rent is increasing, because it's more desirable to work and have businesses here.
Yeah. Watching so many people walk around the city streets last week was just heartwarming. And they weren't all Tacoma Parkers. They were outside people.
Yeah. A lot of folks from Gaithersburg and Upper Silver Spring.
All
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then we will move to budget work session. And the first department up is library, and the director, Ellen Robbins, is here at the dais, so we're ready to go.
Thank you. If I sit here, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Okay. By way of a brief introduction, I'd like to, first of all, review a few of our most significant 2013 accomplishments, if I may. In October, our Computer Learning Center resumed its original weekday hours, opening from 12 to 2 every weekday. Our Summer Quest summer reading program had a record of 280 participants with a total of 2,111 books read, or 300 more than last year. Our new Caldecott Medal Book Club drew more than 50 children and adults to each meeting. The Friends of the Library began partnering with Historic Tacoma, where they had a special holiday book sale netting more than $1,300. They gave the library $6,200 in gifts and to support library programs, including lectures, workshops, Summer Quest, Spanish and French circle times, books for the library and for children in the after-school program at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center. The library also began partnering with Politics and Prose Bookstore as a way of bringing celebrated children's book authors and illustrators to the library free of charge. Our program attendance exceeded 14,000 for the third year in a row. Our one children's librarian presents more than 250 programs a year alone. That's not to mention the ones that are presented by others. In 2014, we plan to meet the demand for Sunday hours in the library and the computer center by providing informed and professional service from 12 to 5 on Sundays. We're also going to plan and implement new programs on Sundays, including passive and make and take programs. I can describe those if you wish. We're going to respond to the community demand for downloadable ebooks and further promote the use of our existing online resources. I can also go into that more if you wish. We're going to continue the collaborations with Politics and Prose Bookstore, Historic Tacoma, and the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center. Together with the Friends, they offer new opportunities for community engagement, outreach, and cost-effective programs. And we're going to pursue new programs in the computer center, which we're already doing, including our Closing the Distance edX online college courses and some ones that are so new they didn't even make it into the budget document, introducing a variety of useful web tools for children. And we'll be doing some planning for our future. So that's intentionally very brief. Now I would like to entertain your questions, any further information you'd like.
Councilmember Daniels-Cohen, is that a leftover light?
That's a leftover light, sorry.
Okay. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you for your presentation. What you said you're going to give us the opportunity to ask more questions about what the future of the library is. Going through the tour, it seemed like it was not a forward-looking library, because everybody seems to be moving more towards digital, whether that is you can download a book online or you can have more opportunities for people to do job searches or things like that. When you look at the budget, the Computer Learning Center is a tiny fraction of the overall library budget. What is the vision to make the library more 21st century?
Well, some of the things we mentioned, that you're mentioning, we have done already, and we're planning to do more. We do have a number of online, both streaming audiobooks and e-books that you can access on a computer, anywhere there's a computer, which include books for adults and kids. So we have a number of those resources. We have online reference tools. these are things we've developed during the last couple of years. And as I mentioned here, we're exploring ebooks that you can ebooks that you can actually download onto your computer and take with you, which is something we haven't had up to now. Some of this has been funding issues, but it's something that we're planning to do more of in the next year. But we've already begun. We've been doing this for the last couple of years. As far as the funding of the computer center is concerned, that's something that was begun about 9 years ago. And it involves, it's intentionally cost-effective. We have a turnkey system in terms of the 2 computer rooms. We have 1 staff person, and we did have some hours taken away from the computer center a couple of years ago in 2010, but they've been restored, and we're getting the Sunday hours there. We've begun some programming there, and we're going to do more of that. So our intention is to be as forward-looking as we can, and I feel that we've been doing that, and insofar as our budget has allowed.
Now, on the tour, you mentioned you have this program where people give you books and then you resell them.
The Friends of the Library actually sell them. We receive them in the library and we pre-sort them. The Friends of the Library have 2 book sales a year on our library lawn. The next one's going to be May 18th. And it's one of their major sources of fundraising. And all those funds do come back to the library in the form of gifts.
And is that enough money to justify the hours that the library uses to help with the program, like the sorting of the books and the storage of the books?
Yeah, we have a system, and the fact that we're able to take them in year-round means that we get very attractive donations. So, yes, I believe it does. I mean, and it's important for the Friends. It's important to increase their visibility. And as I say, all those funds do come back to the library.
Your guest speakers, I didn't go to the last one. Are you going to have more of those, and do you charge for them? Are they
Oh, no. Public libraries do not charge for programs. Clarence Page was our last one, and he was, it was a very good program, a very popular one, drew about in excess of 50 people. That was a presentation of the Friends of the Library at their annual meeting. And, we do have speakers, workshops, storytellers, that the Friends do fund those programs. Some of them come for free. And the relationship with Politics and Prose is enabling us to bring children's book authors who would normally charge. They come to the library for free, and that's a big advantage. I can describe some of them if you like. But
That's fine.
okay,
But thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Councilmember Schultz.
The FTEs are increasing by about, looks like 1.16. Is why is that? What is that for?
Well,
or
we're
about?
hiring, first of all, a half-time children's librarian. Probably we won't have that position in place until the new fiscal year, although we're recruiting now and will begin to be interviewing. This was actually a position that we had and lost 9 years ago when the computer center opened. So we're very happy about being able to restore it. It's partly so we have a professional librarian to work the Sunday hours with a library assistant. That's the standard for public libraries. But also to give support to our children's librarian, who, as I say, single-handedly has been presenting in excess of 250 programs a year. That's an awful lot for one person, and that isn't all she does. She does collection development, she works desk hours like the rest of us, so her programs are very popular. They've really increased our audience of families with young children, and we want to be able to not only support what she's doing, but expand what she's doing. We plan to have Sunday programs with the new librarian. So that's a big part of it. But also we're increasing 3 of our library assistants to full-time status, which is another 20 hours, which we can do without giving them additional benefits. And Dave Burbank, who some of you know about, is one of them. He's our graphic novel expert. He's given workshops with Karen all over the metro area. He's done workshops at Politics and Prose. It's just something that he's very, very good at, and graphic novels are part of the future of any public library. And he's, I think, a recognized expert in this area. But he also helps Karen with programs right now, so it'll
So
need.
the 1.16 then is comprised of first the halftime.
The halftime children's librarian,
And then the
20 hours of library assistant time, so that's equivalent to 1. And then the remaining hours are for the Sunday hours in the computer center.
Okay. All right. I'm just thinking how fortunate we are at this point in time compared to where we were a few years ago, where we were cutting things, and it's such a good feeling to be able to know that we can actually imagine adding hours to to the library and adding hours to the staff's capacity.
Right, that's something that we haven't had in many years, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, those of us who had never been in the back rooms, I had on that tour, may have come to appreciate that you're working in very crowded conditions, and yet you still continue to grow programs and staffing and so forth and so on. It's a little bit miraculous. One of the things that's proposed in this year's budget is a visioning process for a future library. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. And does that have an impact on, or do you think that will have any kind of an impact on this year's budget in terms of time needed to participate in that process professionally?
Well, it will help that we have the additional staff hours to dedicate to something like that. We're thinking about a facilitated process involving community members. We're already providing many traditional library services as well as new ones, and contemplating still more new ones. So as we evolve, it sort of makes sense at this point, to step back and engage the community in a discussion about the direction we're heading in, and make sure that people in the community are part of that process of change as we evolve.
Do you envision the envisioning process to include not just programming and services, but the facility and a future and improved
Anything
facility?
that people are interested in
Okay.
focusing on,
Okay.
absolutely.
I think it's much needed.
Yeah, we've been in this building since 1955. The current building was built, I happen to have these figures at my fingertips. The current building was built in 55. An addition, which is the reference room, was done in 1968. We had our renovation of the public spaces in 1990. 95, the staff areas were renovated. And in 1994, there was a feasibility study with some library designers about the possibility of adding on to the library, but there was a lot of other things going on at the time. That was the period when the community center was under discussion, and at the time, some of the neighborhoods, especially over towards Cedar, were concerned about the loss of green space, which might still be true, but I'm just telling you about some of the history of, thinking about the library building and how it evolved.
I just want to follow up on part of Councilmember Schultz's question. As you were answering about the increase in the FTEs, at first I thought you were saying that a bunch of this was due to the increase in the Sunday hours, but then when you got to the
Some
end,
of it is, yes.
But I thought I heard you at the beginning saying that a lot of it was, but then at the end, it sounded like the .16 was the Sunday hours. So I just wanted to make sure that we understand
He's talking about the computer center staff person.
right.
There's one full-time equivalent is for the library, composed of half-time librarian and 20 hours of library assistant time
Right.
for the existing staff, and the remainder is for the computer center, which will be open 12 to 5 on Sundays. So that needs additional hours. That's one person staffing the computer center.
Right, but, so that's, the two pieces totaled up.
Well, the
Yes.
library is open on Sunday, too. So that's,
I just want to make sure I understand the ramifications of extending the library hours to Sunday on the full-time equivalent in this budget, and then what pieces aren't tied to that, and what, if any, obligations there have been toward those positions, or whether they are strictly being proposed in this budget, but there's no process to do anything with those until this budget is approved.
We don't have all the funding for that right now. We do have some of it. We're actually going to be opening Sundays in May, and the current staff of librarians, we're going to be working the Sundays and rotating them, and we're going to be working with a combination of substitute help and current staff who are voluntarily working those extra hours.
But in the FTEs in this proposed budget, how much of it is due to adding Sunday hours?
Well,
In total, is it, sounds like it's
I'd have to walk you,
0.46?
I'm
Well,
confused.
but-
I'd have to walk you through
I
this
heard
budget.
there were other pieces that were half and .2. I just want to understand how much of the 1.16 increase in FTE in this proposed budget is due to the decision to add the Sunday hours, and how much of it is other things. And I thought I started to hear something about there was some process going forward for hiring somebody for something other than dealing with the Sunday hours.
Yes.
Well, the new person will be working every Sunday. That's part of the job description. But it's true, you're not talking about all 20 of their hours. The remaining hours, because we're recruiting a person with experience in children's services and programming, will allow us to expand our own programming. As I said before, we had this position 9 years ago,
Right.
and that was without Sunday hours.
Right. So as envisioned, the increase in Sunday hour, the increase to add Sunday hours is resulting in a full-time position being added, part of which would cover Sunday hours.
Well, it's resulting in 40, a full-time equivalent, but
Right.
only half of that is another staff person. The rest of it is increased hours for existing staff people.
who also have to come on Sunday. We'll go through
Got
and
that.
we'll go through and calculate how many, if there's the amount of
I just-
extra hours during the Monday through Saturday, that there would be some assistance with the part-time librarian.
Yeah, those people who are on staff now and are being raised to full-time status will be working Sundays with the librarian. They will be rotating Sundays. And I've already made it available to Suzanne, but I could let you know the schedule, how that breaks down.
All I'm trying to do is make sure that we understand the ramifications on this budget for the decision to add Sunday hours in the library.
I'll get an actual calculation for you.
Because I think
It's,
people were thinking it was going to be one increment, and it's turning out to be a larger increment.
I'll get the exact percentage to you. It's the bulk of the 1.16, but I'll have to get the exact number for you.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for being here this evening, but especially thank you for your ongoing leadership with the library.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to talk with city residents about our library because they're always very complimentary. It's been a pleasure for me on the council to deal with library issues because they're always seem to be in a positive vein. And
That's very fortunate.
and that's greatly due, I believe, to your leadership there. So I compliment you on that. I also think you've done a good job of morphing the library into the new age. Technology has certainly greatly changed the way that libraries operate and the services. Excuse me. The services the libraries provide, and excuse me, as I said, I think you've done a good job of making that transition, and also of broadening the programs that the library offers, and always addressing not just the needs of the children, but also of adults in the programs that you offer.
Thank you.
I'm glad that Councilmember Schultz brought up the envisioning process that we see included in the library budget this year. I think Councilmember Smith's questions are right on point about where do we really see the library going, because technology is changing our world so rapidly. Excuse me a second, please. Dinner is going down the wrong way, I guess. My only question is that the bulletin here says seek community input to plan for the library's future. And that's it could be interpreted in a wide variety of ways. It could
That's
mean a simple paper survey or a computer survey, or it could mean a charrette, or it could mean a longer process where there's actually some presentations of alternatives that are seen around the country, a much more comprehensive envisioning process. And I would just state for the record that I envision the latter of those that we do. I think given the way technology is changing our world and the way that libraries are changing across the country, I think we need a serious, lengthy conversation with the community and with planners to think about where do we really want, where do we see, what should our goals be for the library, and how are we going to get there? And I think that includes a discussion about, is it time to modify, expand, or replace the structure itself, the facility itself? Is it time to look at the amount of space that we dedicate to print copies of the materials? Are the traditional services that libraries have provided still appropriate and the best use of resources for the future? So I'm hopeful that that's what that means, rather than something simple.
Right, yeah. I think that traditional library services are still important, but certainly they're not sufficient. And that's why we've been moving forward for the last couple of years within the financial constraints that we had. I mean, initially when we started purchasing, the online resources, the books, the language learning tools. For the first year, the Friends of the Library funded them. And then when there was some clear success and public use of them, the council started funding them. But we were only talking about $5,000 as part of the budget. And really what we're envisioning now for the downloadable ebooks is something not very expensive either. We're looking at different alternatives. There's a platform called Freeding, which is a use-based, really a subscription model that allows multiple simultaneous use of about, at this point, I think around 26,000 titles from small and medium-sized publishers that we're going to be able to offer. We're going to be able to offer our users. The same people offer something called Freegal, if you've never heard of it. I think some of the county systems have it, which is music, and it's really great and popular. We're not funded for that right now, but we could be in the future, or the Friends could perhaps help with it. I don't.
And I'm sure that some of us are always want to be able to curl up with a good book, too, so
Absolutely, and yeah.
thank you.
So in terms of the process, we have, I think, $3,000 for a facilitator in the budget. We'll see how far that goes, but I would like to have, more discussion with you and other people on the council about how you would like to see this developed. And certainly, I think a facilitator of some kind should be involved.
Great, yeah, I think that's probably the bottom line is I'd like to see the council participate in the planning
Absolutely.
for that process.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Daniels-Collins.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Robbins, for your fabulous presentation here. I'm going to one more time invite the council to come May 18th and see what goes on at the book sale. You will be shocked at the massive doses of people that start. You will be shocked. At 8 o'clock, they hit the road and jump onto the books, and then it continues for the full day. It
I don't
doesn't
have a
stop.
vehicle big enough for me to go to that,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
because I would have to have a big one to take it home.
it's book dealers, it's people who just want to. I've gotten so many presents for other people, brand new books for $1. And I've also, if you come there, you will not leave without buying a book from me, by the way.
Okay, all this helps.
If I'm working the table. So I invite you to come and take a look at that book sale. The children's books are awesome. It's an incredible Friends of the Library kind of an event, twice a year. The actual Friends of the Library are so important because the library itself has actually engaged the community in being a part of the actual library system and being givers and being volunteers. The book clubs are the adult book clubs. I'm not doing the little kid book clubs, but all the Caldecott, it's so exciting to go in there. I invite you to go into the library any day and know that there's stuff going on. People are Wi-Fiing, people are reading. The place is packed with human beings. So I'm not telling a tale out of school at all. I'm going to call this The Little Engine That Could, and that's an old book, The Little Engine That Could, because it's, as we saw in the tour, it's pretty squished, yet they still are able to pull off all these programs. And what's most exciting, I know I keep saying build it and they will come, opening Sunday hours. Opening Sunday hours for the community, because our whole community can't get to the library all week. Everybody can't get there all week. And for the library personnel to actually be programming things that people can see is really exciting. You all are, you're getting an idea where my passions are. I got to say, I didn't realize that this particular building was 1955, because I used to read Story Hour at number 8 Sherman Avenue, because that's where the library started. Number 8 Sherman Avenue, teeny tiny house, nooks and crannies, ups and downs, ins and outs, and I thought it was still open into the 60s, but maybe not. And Miss
Well,
Robbins,
it's still a house, but...
it's still a house. The house is still there, but so Tacoma Park has had a library for a very, very, very long time. Let's see, I think, and a thing about the e-books. See, I'm an old guy, and I appreciate the e-books. I appreciate the ability to download a book, but there is nothing like picking one up, smelling it, touching it, opening it, turning the pages, feeling the rattle. It's a totally different experience. Now, as the younger folks are coming along, they are not having that kind of experience. They've got their computers, but us old guys still like our handheld books. We love them. So, and I know we need the e-books. I know we need to move forward. I know that I'm not going to hold us back, but I'm just always impressed with what happens in that, I'm going to call it a tiny space. It's quite a tiny space. When you go into some of the Montgomery County libraries that are huge, we probably, this library probably does as much as any single, with our population, as any single one Montgomery County library. I'm done. Good work.
Thank you.
Councilmember Romeo.
Thank you, Mayor. Oops. There we go. Thank you for being here tonight. I just noted while we were talking about how much of the position is associated with the Sunday hours that if you calculate the number of hours of increased service the libraries would be provided, it's about 9%. The position costs are an increase of 11%. So it's pretty close to what the hours increases are. I wanted to ask about the downloadable ebook piece, because I noticed that there's no significant increase in supplies or services. So how would that be possible?
The Freeding platform that we looked at actually would probably only cost us about $2,000 in the first year. It's based on use, and it's actually a token-based system. And if we use up the $2,000, we can purchase more, but that was recommended as a first-year figure for us. If we're just doing the downloadable ebooks, there's also Rocket Languages associated with that, which is very inexpensive, and the Freegal, which is that's the music. It's very popular. It's about $5,000, but we didn't put a request in for this year's budget. We wanted to see how the rest went, because there's a whole process of integrating it, with our system, with our catalog, so people know what we have and so forth.
Am I right in thinking that that membership in the county library system is accessible to residents of Tacoma Park?
Oh,
You can
yeah,
join Montgomery County.
of course.
And do you have-
Anybody, yeah,
You have to
absolutely.
pay for that, or
In the other libraries?
in the county system?
No, not at all. They're
Because-
all free.
And I ask about that just because the benefit of our library is it's right there. The benefit of ebooks is they're everywhere. You don't have to physically be in the library. You can be in the library, but if you're accessing them through a mobile device, you could access them from the county system. And this speaks to Councilmember Schultz and Siemens' conversation about the visioning process. I use digital media all the time, but nevertheless, I could see for our library that there may be more benefit in focusing on the physical services we provide, and having e-services be something where we try to focus demand on county services. So that's just a comment related to the visioning process. I had suggested during the process where we were deciding on opening the library for Sundays that we move to, because this is something we're trying, just doing it for the 9 months of the year outside of the school year. That would be a way to create cost savings. If we don't do that, then I would very much like to see the the budget commit us to providing the back data to the council on daily use per month throughout the year of both the library and the computer center separately. So we would know whether on Sundays we're actually getting a service provided, and so we would know whether on Sundays, or frankly on Tuesdays and Thursdays, summer use looks like what we think it might look. And my hope is that we see lots of demand and demand grow. But I'd like to see that in the budget documents. I guess just a more general comment that I'm going to make, which is not specific to the library budget, is that I'm concerned about the overall number of FTEs in the budget. And so through this process of talking about budget reconciliation, I'm going to be having to find ways to make recommendations on not increasing our FTEs as rapidly as this budget does. But that doesn't mean that this is which is why I'm not suggesting a particular level right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the library? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll go next to Housing and Community Development. And we'll be joined by Housing and Community Development Director Sarah Daines.
Good evening.
Welcome to the hottest spot in the room. Because the
cooler than
lights
my
are on.
office at the moment,
Is
but yeah.
is the fan running?
I'm just inquiring about.
Because there's so many layers to my budget, because of the variety of programming that we do, I thought I would just do a quick overview of the departmental budget as a whole, go through the individual divisions quickly, point out some of this new programming or continuing programming that we addressed in a little bit more detail in the supplemental information that was provided to you, and then move on to, and that sort of folds into it anyway, but move on to some of the non-departmental programming that we administer, as well as the special revenue and the capital projects. Does that work for everyone?
I would just want to note that the material that was supplied here, I just got to, we just got it when we came to the
All the more reason for me to go
dais.
through it in
So-
great gory detail for you.
Yeah, because, I did, read the material in the binder, but this is much more rich material, so I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I don't know about anybody else.
Fine. And frankly, as I understand it, with the reconciliation process and the discussion afterwards, if there are issues that come up that impact the Housing and Community Development Department budget, there is ample opportunity to immerse yourself in the detailed information I've already given you, or ask for additional information, because I've undoubtedly missed something. Okay, with that being said, the Housing and Community Development Department is made up of 6 different divisions. Our overall operating budget within those 6 divisions is roughly $1.5 million, and that is fairly flat compared to last year. I think there's a little bit of an increase, which could be compared to a typical CIP increase as far as expenses. But there is a lot of movement within the individual divisions as well as individual projects. So if you see some numbers that look really high compared to past years, it may be because I've decided that it would be a better fit in a different category, or we've dropped a programming that has been completed. Our FTEs at this point are 10.66 FTEs. We're not proposing any new additional staff members. We were fortunate enough this year to get a half-time management assistant that has made a world of difference as far as the workload for myself personally. And then we have an arts internship that just started last week, which is also helpful as far as some of the cultural programming that we're doing. So we're not looking at any increases from the FTE perspective that's reported here. There are additional FTE changes in the Special Revenue Fund, and that's with this Safe Routes to School program. So the number that's included in the summary sheet for the in the budget does not include that individual, and that FTE is dropped because of the grant funding expires the end of December. We are in the process of applying for additional grant funds that will be bringing that proposal back to you in May as part of the revised application process. Roughly 61% of our overall departmental budgets are personnel related. And what else did I miss here? Sorry. And as we go through the budgets, you'll see that there are some new programs that were introduced in FY13 that we'd like to continue for next year. They've been successful or are looking to be quite successful, or they've been historically a positive program that we've been able to offer to the community. And then we have just a couple of new projects or programs that we're proposing, and those are primarily in the Community Development Department budget. Okay. So what I'd like to do, if this works for everyone, is move on to code enforcement, or excuse me, HCD administration. Is that next? Are you working off the memo, or are you working off of the budget document itself?
Why don't you tell us what you're working off of, and they'll...
I can do both. Why don't we do the budget? The budget document
Budget,
with the...
because I'd wager that most of us have not looked at the
No,
supplemental.
we just got it, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, I saw when I got here and looked at the hard packet that the electronic version went out at 4:30 this afternoon, but I didn't know that.
Okay, we'll work off the document that you received the other week, and that's one with the blue bar across the top.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Administration Division. The overall costs that are allocated for this division are $180,692, and that is basically where we put all of the general operating expenses associated with the division. Copying, mailing, telephones, that type of things, supplies that impact all of the divisions, rather than divvy it up between code enforcement and housing, et cetera. Our FTEs that are dedicated for this particular division are 1.4, and 77% of the overall budget is focused on personnel expenses. One of the things I wanted to point out in terms of the management objectives is that when you look at the budget, we have a performance and workload measures chart that tracks what's been going on in the last couple of years. Within the department, we've been talking for quite some time about whether or not that's an accurate measure of the success of the programming that we provide. Erica and I went through a training about 4 months ago and looked at new ways that we can measure the impact of the programs on the community itself. Most of the benchmark measures that we have included in our section of the budget are workload kinds of numbers. I mean, X number of phone calls, we had X number of meetings, et cetera. But that doesn't really tell us whether or not the programming that we're providing is impactful. So we're looking at developing new measures as far as turnaround time on code compliance cases, the number of people that are participating in some of the outreach programs, et cetera. So next year this may look different, but that's one of the things that each of the divisions will be working on, and we're hoping to have it wrapped up by July 1st, so we can start tracking it a little differently.
Sounds good. Do you want to go through all of them? Do you want to take questions by section?
We can take questions by sections?
Is the
Councilmember Schultz.
administrative assistant 2 position, is that filled? Or is
Yes.
that- it is?
Natalia started,
Okay.
what month is this? She started in January, I believe. She's fairly new, and she's doing a great job.
Okay, that's all.
And I just have a quick question. Back on page 88.
To confuse things, I don't have a numbers on my pages.
The departmental summary.
You want me to pretty
Okay, got it.
picture look at.
It's the kids with the trash.
Got it.
Recycle day,
Trashy Art Day.
trashy art day.
The property owner assistance for code violations, 80,000. How long has that been going? How long has that been in the budget?
This is included in the affordable housing budget, and it was sort of an offshoot of the Mission Serve program that we did in past years through the Community Development Block Grant
So
Program.
this is the very recent one.
This is the new one that we're working on with Habitat for Humanity. They're in the process of wrapping up the scope of services, and we're looking to be able to do about 25 houses, depending upon what the final budgets come through. So it's been successful from that perspective, and we're hoping to continue it on again next fiscal year. The nice thing about doing it with the general fund monies is it gives us a lot more flexibility than the block grant program, for example, or other funding resources.
Okay, I just want to make sure what that was going forward and, you know, how we had gotten there.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. On the code enforcement, is that partial payment to the county for them doing code enforcement for us, or is that for our people, or?
No. We have a memorandum of agreement with the county that we entered into in, I'd say, 2003, 2004. Prior to that point in time, we had our code enforcement staff consisted of the supervisor, a program assistant, and I think 5 inspectors, which was not working as well as I would have liked it to have. So we started contracting out with Montgomery County to provide inspection services for our rental housing licensing program. It's proven to be cost-effective. They have more resources available when they need to go through and do a large building. They can bring in 12 people, or if that's what it needs to be. And it gives us a lot more flexibility, and it allows us to be a little more nimble as far as that. So that's what that number is. That's the contract price on an annual basis for inspection services related specifically to the rental housing licensing program.
Okay, and that's the 472, 472,400 proposed FY13.
No, that would,
212.
it's 212, yeah. 400 and odd is the entire department, or the entire division budget.
Okay, and so 50% of that is the county agreement?
More or less, yeah.
Okay. And has it always been a savings of 50%?
It's been a while since I don't know if it's a savings of 50%, but historically it's been less than the staffing costs that we would otherwise incur. Because it's not just people, it's office space, it's vehicles, it's computers, it's everything.
And how often is that agreement renegotiated?
Every 3 years.
Okay.
And if I can just add that there's a history of the city having employees do code enforcement, then going to the county, then that didn't work so well, so it came back to the city, then that didn't work so well, so it went back to the county.
Okay.
And it's working fabulously. I mean, we have glitches, which is to be expected, but overall it's been working really well.
Now, in your, I guess historically, it says that your personnel cost is around 61%. How long has it been that way? Is it last 5 years, 3 years?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that historically, a majority of the budget is dedicated towards personnel.
I know, yeah.
We're people heavy, though we do contract out for a lot of services, and I think we get a lot accomplished with the combination of the two.
I just took a little peek at the supplemental that you gave, and some of these numbers regarding Ward 5 are troubling. Is there a plan to reduce the number of, I guess, assistance need for these people?
Excuse me. What Councilmember Smith is referring to in the supplemental information is emergency assistance funds that the council makes available through its non-departmental budget. This year, we have $25,000 budgeted, or in fiscal 14, we're asking for $25,000, and that is supplemented by donations that the community makes as part of their stormwater fee payment. Those funds have been set aside specifically to provide people with emergency service assistance for mortgages, rent, food, prescriptions, et cetera, and it's broken out in the not pie chart, but bar chart that's included in the supplemental. The city is not geared up, at least not at this particular point in time, to provide more social service types of activities. This is intended, at least initially, to provide sort of that stopgap measure for people that really are in need on a short-term basis. It's not going to fix anything in the long term because there's job training, childcare issues, a variety of things that would have to be implemented to actually reduce the number of people that may or may not be in need of emergency assistance.
Right. I'm just afraid that if we don't come up with a plan, it might just get worse rather than better.
The one thing that we do or that we do have the capacity to do is to make referrals, which sounds sort of like a pushing your answer off, but right now that is really the only thing that we have staffing for and capacity for right now as far as making sure that people get connected with the agency or the organization that can provide them with that additional training or support that they need so that they are not having to access the emergency assistance program. And we do that a lot. In fact, landlord-tenant staff is in the process right now of updating their community services guide so that when people do come in and fall within specific categories, if you will, for need or their housing status, we can make referrals so that they can tap into folks that are better trained, that have more resources and experience than we might have internally.
Okay, thank you.
Well, while I'm thinking of it, let me just double-check with Councilmember Grimes and see if he has anything at this point.
That's it for him.
Councilmember Grimes.
Sorry, hello? You hearing me?
There we go.
Now we got you.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I sent Councilmember Mail a text. I'm having trouble with my phone. At a certain point, the screen shuts off, and I cannot unmute. But no, I don't have any questions at this time. I do have a question regarding the Tacoma Junction streetscape stuff, but that's not yet.
Okay. Good. Councilmember Mail.
Thank you. At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned, and I didn't quite catch something about a position for which the funding has expired, but you will be applying for new funding.
Yes, that's the Safe Routes to School program. Many of you may have met or come in contact with Lucy Neer, who has been in the position for, I think we're in our, I meant to look before I came down, but man, we've been doing it a long time. At least 5 years, if not 8. And she is totally grant funded. We had hoped that we might be able to move her into the speed camera fund because it's, from our perspective, it's linked. But because of the anticipated funding that might be available through that program, we're not going to be able to do that this year. We are submitting an application that will be before you in May. We're hopeful that we can continue to a lot of the programming that she does.
So my question was her FTE time in the prior year's budget, and is it now out of this year's budget?
It's as I understand the FTE thing, Lucy has always been in the Special Revenue Fund FTE and not part of the departmental FTE.
And for the answer for that, on the personnel sheet that I sent out to you yesterday, but it's also in the back of the agenda item 6, the attachment to agenda item 6. She has, you'll see the times from actual FY10. She's 0.5, then she went up to 1.87. There was 1.87 amount of FTEs associated. Last year it was 0.4. This year we have 0.19 FTEs.
Much of that has to do with the priorities of the funding agency. Initially, they were really hot and heavy on programming. Then they kind of decided they like sidewalks and trails. And our fear is that they're going to go back to capital projects as opposed to programming. And programming is the thing that makes our particular Safe Routes to School effort unique and so successful.
Okay. We'll go to the next one.
Okay, so we've sort of done HCD administration. Why don't we move on to code enforcement? The overall budget for this division is $472,400, and as Councilmember Smith pointed out, roughly half of that is for services and charges, and a majority of that amount is with our contract with Montgomery County. It's a fairly flat budget based on FY13 and a 0.3% increase. And we're not looking at any changes in FTEs there. We have 3 full-time staff. We have had a lot of movement within this particular division as far as staffing is concerned. We have a new inspector that will be coming on April 22nd. We are all very excited. That'll allow us to sort of, once we go through the training process, we'll be able to gear up and do more of some of the code enforcement things that we have long desired to do. As Councilmember Schultz is giving me the thumbs up, it's good.
Yes.
The other expenses associated with this particular division are the Clean and Lean program. If there is a case where the property owner is not in a position or has delayed at great lengths addressing some code-related issues, it'll give us the flexibility to go ahead and make those repairs, mow the lawn, cut out the rubbish, all of that on their behalf. And would then be billed to them and eventually placed on their property taxes if they did not pay. It also provides funding for our online tracking systems that we use for both the rental housing licensing program and for the code inspection activities themselves. One of the things that is not specifically addressed in this narrative that we've been planning to do for quite some time is to do more of a proactive community outreach effort to increase people's familiarity or awareness of the minimum property maintenance standards that have been endorsed by the community overall. I know that in Ward 6 and in Ward 5, trash, for lack of a better word, has been an ongoing challenge, and we're hoping to address some of that through this effort, be it a print media program or social media, electronic, a variety of things. We're going to try. It doesn't necessarily, not sure how effective it will be, but we're going to give it a shot because it is a problem that is becoming increasingly annoying to a number of the constituents. But basically, no big changes in code enforcement this year.
Councilmember Schultz.
You know, I'm glad to hear you talk about the trash problem. I sent you a couple code properties I need you, just for that reason, where it just sort of seems there's this idea that people have that you can use the outdoors to store everything that won't fit indoors. And
I'm personally at that point in my house.
well, yeah. And, you know, people try to disguise it under tarps and behind bushes and all that, and it doesn't work, and there's just certain property owners that are real persistent in that regard. You talked about earlier at the beginning about reviewing your management objectives, or at least these charts, the things that you choose to measure. And that, I think, is particularly relevant in the code enforcement area, where I think it's maybe interesting to read all these numbers on this chart here. You know, it's just to see the volume of work that you have to deal with annually. But really, what I'm curious about and would love to be able to see is that, are we making progress in terms of improving the quality, the appearance, the exteriors of our houses? Because if you look at these trends, it sort of seems like it's a steady state. You know, we just go to work every day and keep churning out the inspection NOVs and other stuff, and you know, solve this problem, and another problem pops up somewhere else, and we never. I mean, so the question then becomes: are we actually? Is the appearance, the exteriors of properties in the city better now than it was 2 years or 5 or 10 years ago? And there's really no way of seeing if we're going forward or if we're just sort of spinning our wheels. And that's what I'd like to be able to understand.
Of all of the divisions regarding how to measure community impact of the programming that we provide, this one is frankly the hardest one, because you don't really want to establish a reduction in complaints, because that's not necessarily indicative of what the problems are. We're kicking around survey types of ways of measuring people's awareness, or the response time to courtesy notices that we do for minor things, so that people go, oh yeah, I was out for the weekend and my grass grew 3 feet, kind of a thing. So this is the one that's going to be the most problematic. And when we get a better feel for it, because we're kicking around a variety of different options right now.
What I would want you to kick around is that instead of measuring complaints, measuring success.
No, yeah, especially
You know what I'm
in terms of
saying?
turnaround time.
I'm talking about turnaround time. I'm talking about success in the number of houses out of the total finite number of houses that aren't that are not out of compliance. So that, you know, you can sort of say, well, in Ward 6, you know, we had, 76 houses that were out of compliance, and now in such and such a fiscal year, that number is greatly reduced, or something like that.
Yeah.
That would all give us hope.
We will explore that option.
Right. I think that's the main thing that I wanted to say on that.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. We've had issues with dumpsters in particular in portions of Ward 2 along New Hampshire Avenue, 410 in New Hampshire. And I guess, I'd like to see, right now it feels like we have complaint-based response by code enforcement. And when we have known, and you may do some of this already, so it's a follow-up. You don't necessarily have to answer this now. But I'd like to see more ability to essentially to identify hotspots of problems and then have proactive code enforcement go there every day or every 2 days or every 3 days, or with police providing a drive-by ability to check on that, as opposed to what feels like constituent-driven issues.
Just for information, we do that when we have a fully staffed department or division. We do that through our targeted inspection program, which is why Councilmember Schultz is so familiar with the Code Enforcement Division, where we proactively identify properties that have proven to be problematic and include that in the route that the inspector does. The person who is going to be starting, that will be one of their primary responsibilities. So can we do better? Yes. Is it something that we've been interested in terms of heading it off before we get a complaint? We've been working towards that. Our effectiveness varies.
To Councilmember Schultz's comment about positive metrics, one thing that would really help, for example, for a 3-month period, if the department documented drive-bys that didn't result in a citation, but drive-bys for some of those places. If there's any way to do something like that, it shows success, right? You drive by, you don't issue a citation. That would just show the community that the department is being proactive. And I suggest 3 months, but a way that make it work, that the paperwork doesn't become a burden. I'm not interested in just creating more work for your staff, but that would just show a level of we would be able to prove that the department is being proactive, and people, I think, would feel good about that. My other comment, more to my colleagues, is that I guess, and if others are interested in a different version of this, I'd be interested too, but during reconciliation, I'm really interested in whether we can find out whether any reduction, 10 or 20% reduction in the $210,000-ish that we provide to the county, any reduction in that amount could allow us to hire part of an FTE for the purposes of having an advocate on staff, somebody who helps, again, on the proactive side, deal with code enforcement issues. It could even cover some of the assistance issues that we talked about earlier. That could be focused on rental properties. It could be focused citywide. But anyway, that's something that I'm interested in, and I'm interested in understanding how some reduction in that contract would allow us to do X percent fewer inspections. So we're giving something in order to get something, and I just want to understand what that trade-off is, which I hope could be follow-up information. But again, I'll raise that in reconciliation. Thank you.
Do we still have different levels of, like if somebody has no code complaints, they're inspected on less often?
Montgomery County's licensing program requires an inspection every 3 years. The city does it once a year, except for those homes or those properties that are considered, that have 5 or fewer minor code violations, which could be, there's a long list as what constitutes minor. And then we only go through and do an inspection every 2 years. An inspection could be multiple inspections depending upon the findings of the inspector. But that is the biggest difference. So if you're looking at ways to cut that contract back, that might be one way of doing that and reducing the frequency of the licensing inspection requirement. And that would involve a change in the code, which ironically enough we are in the process of working on. But that would be one way of impacting the level of that contract.
Yeah, because we've had various discussions over the years about how to concentrate code enforcement toward the worst problems and not put quite so many resources into the ones that are much less problem.
And those, again, are done every 2 years. They tend to be single-family homes or duplexes.
Councilmember Swett.
Could you look at, like my colleague, Councilmember Mayo asked about, looking at if we reduce the contract. Can you pinpoint if we go to 3 years, how much that savings would be?
I can talk to them and see what we can figure out.
Okay.
And I just have one quick question in this area. The rental license is discontinued. Is there anything that you can say about why they're discontinued? I'm assuming maybe they revert to single-family status as a owner-occupied. Are there other things going on for discontinued rental licenses?
It's a majority of the discontinueds are people who have purchased a single-family house that was rented and they moved in it for their own purpose, or they bought an apartment building, for lack of a better word, and combined units and then to create a larger living space for their own purposes. Occasionally we'll have people that just walk away from their property and they don't want to deal with this anymore, or renters anymore, and they'll just discontinue the license and leave the building vacant. That doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
Because that's what I was wondering, whether there were ones that were kind of bigger issues.
A majority of them are people who purchased property and have turned it into their own personal primary residence.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a program that promotes that? That promotes people taking multifamilies and turn them into single families?
No. We're preserving and enhancing affordable housing. We're not reducing.
That's heresy.
Some people in my ward would argue with that.
I know.
Well, take them to the woodshed.
One last question, and that is the clean and lean. Do you have enough money in that? Is the $10,000 adequate to do what you need to do?
As long as we don't run into any 36 Philadelphia kinds of projects. Frankly, it's probably fine. If there is a specific property that is overly programmatic, we will need to come back to you and ask you for either additional funds or
A
to
supplemental.
rebudget stuff, yeah. I'm, fingers crossed, that's not going to happen.
Okay, let's move to the next section.
Do you expect to recover any funds from 36 Philadelphia in the next fiscal year?
We are in the process of tallying up the expenses associated with that particular project, which includes the environmental assessment, the engineering survey, the demolition costs, the legal fees, and the basic clean and lean expenses that we incurred throughout this process. We will be billing the property owner, and if they have not repaid that bill or paid that bill within 30 days, depending upon how close it is to the June cutoff for transferring uncollected debt over to the county for placement on property taxes, it'll go on their property tax. They will need to pay that bill, that property tax bill, or at a certain point in time, it'll go up for a property tax sale. But right now, the property owner continues to own the property and owes us at least $30,000, if not more.
You know, it occurs to me to ask if this isn't an improper time. The city is owed a substantial amount of property taxes by the Washington McLaughlin property, and it would be very nice to recover that as well. That's a statement, I guess. If you have any way to address that, fine.
We can do some we can write up our knowledge of that particular property and give you something that's more carefully thought out than what I might be able to respond to tonight.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've taken care of that section. Want to move along to landlord-tenant?
Landlord-tenant. Overall budget for this division is $126,315. That's an increase of 1.6% compared to FY13. Again, the division FTEs are unchanged, and we have 1.22 assigned to this particular activity. The folks in this assigned to this particular division are responsible for mediating complaints between landlords and tenants. We do a lot of education and outreach for both tenants as well as landlords for home ownership or just increasing people's awareness of their rights as a tenant. And one of the staff members assigned to this division also oversees our emergency assistance contracts. There is no new programming plan for this particular division.
Questions? Maybe you covered this. I was just looking at something else. The emergency assistance recipients is way up. Is there a reason for that?
In FY13, you guys increased our budget up to $40,000, and in an effort to spend the money that you had asked us to, we've done quite an extensive amount of outreach, and as a result, more people are aware of the program. We've also expanded the scope of it, so rather than contracting out with a single organization to provide that assistance, we sought out folks through emergency food shelf things. So we now have 2 contracts that are running, and as a result, the beneficiaries are have increased.
So the need was always there. The funding is there more now. Therefore, the recipients went up.
Right.
Okay. Thanks. Anything else in this area? Colta.
Colta, this is our Commission on Landlord and Tenant Affairs. We have primary responsibility in here is oversight of the city's rent stabilization program, and then also serving as a hearing board for landlord-tenant complaints that we are unable to mediate in-house. Frankly, Moses Wilds, who does much of our mediation, does an excellent job, and as a result, the actual cases that go to hearing is fairly low, given a community of our size and the variety of landlord-tenant laws that are in place. This budget is $80,000. Again, primarily personnel-related. There's no change in the FTEs, so we're at .62 that are assigned to this budget. And roughly a quarter of the overall budget is focused on services and contracts. This is where you'll see the contract that the city has with Dr. Ken Barr to review and issue opinions regarding fair return rent increase petitions. And then we also have the maintenance fees associated with our online rents reporting system. A couple of years ago, we went from purely paper reporting system where we'd entered into a D-Base 3 thing. Now it's all done online through the web with automatic checks and balances, which has worked out well. There's no new programming plan for this division.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I'm looking at the numbers of people who actually attend or actually file fair return petitions, and they are willfully low.
I know.
Do we have any ideas how to get more people to partake in the program?
We do. I can tell you what we do, and if you have some other suggestions, that would be great. We do quarterly trainings on the program, and then to walk people through the whole process.
Do people attend?
Yes, they actually come to the thing. They'll sit through it, and it's like 4 hours long. Then at each monthly landlord certification seminar, we point out the fact that if an individual's property is subject to rent stabilization and the annual rent increases, which can be fairly nominal in the eyes of many, are not sufficient to cover operating costs and to preserve, if you will, that bit of profit that you've planned on, you can go through the fair return petition process. What we have learned over time, and we're hoping that these numbers will change, is that people, particularly the smaller property owners, are not as diligent about keeping their paperwork as they could be, because you have to be able to document your expenses, and it's a fairly, it can be a fairly fat application, if you will. We've tried to simplify it as much as possible, but you need to prove or document all of your expenses, and that has proven to be sort of overwhelming for a number of property owners. But we're hopeful that we've done enough of the trainings and we've mentioned it enough to people during the certification programs that people are now tracking their expenses, keeping those little receipts and all of that, so that we will see an uptick in the number of fair return petitions.
Okay, thank you.
I have one quick question. When the question comes up about kind of what COLTA costs, does anybody ever associate the costs for the city attorney who acts as part of that process?
These costs do not include the city attorney's office. Kenneth Sigmund
Right.
serves as the executive director of COLTA and is at all of the hearings, does all of the legal research,
Right.
and
So
that.
the way of associating that cost is to look at that account within the city attorney billing and say, well, here, this much of it belongs with that?
Correct. And it's a little trickier than that because there's a general COLTA bill, and then there are individual bills for individual cases.
So it could be associating 3, 4, 5, 6 different sub-accounts for the city attorney with COLTA to come up with the true cost.
Right.
And he hasn't always served as the executive director. At one point, not that long ago, it was a city staff member, so that cost has been basically shifted out of this area to the city attorney's office.
When I started working here, there was a woman who was assigned to that responsibility. She's a full-time staff person. I think she's actually an attorney.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
Her initials were DLB.
That's right. One of the things that, one of the conversations that we've started with staff in the last month, actually, is how we might be able to further streamline the process with COLTA. in terms of doing some more of the investigative work at the front end, rather than leaving a lot of that up to Colta itself. Historically, the council has always wanted us to take a sort of a hands-off approach in terms of interacting with Colta in terms of the hearings and the rulings and things like that. Not wanting us to be pro-tenant or not wanting us to be pro-landlord or to be perceived as pro-landlord. We've been talking about possibility of being more proactive in terms of investigating some of the complaints, if only just to verify that the bill from the plumber is actually a plumber and he actually did the work, that kind of a thing. Or that all of the documentation that's needed for the board to effectively review a case is submitted and is in an understandable format that can be useful. It should streamline the whole back-end review process and theoretically have an impact on the legal fees.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've just started that conversation.
Any other
It'll be an
questions?
interesting one.
Any other questions on Colta? Councilmember Grimes, if you have anything, holler.
No, thank you.
Your muting is working better.
Yeah, well, I was quicker on it that time.
Okay, community development.
The Community Development Department, or Division, or the Planning Division, has an overall operating budget of $492,695. That is a roughly 4.4% increase from FY13. And it's, with many of our divisions, a majority of the expenditures, 64% are dedicated for personnel costs. We have 3.76 FTEs dedicated for this particular division. Roughly a quarter of the operating budget is with services and contracts. And this is where you need to go to the supplemental information that you got. There were a couple of did that come with the
You want to go to the white sheet?
white sheet? Okay.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. Supplemental information, white sheet,
first white
top, yes. What we've done is just pulled out some of the programming that's budgeted in this particular division to give you sort of a sense of what's new, what's ongoing, and give you a little more flexibility in terms of responding to budgeting. We're proposing, as noted during the public comment period, continuation of the Main Street or the Old Tacoma Business Association operating subsidy. This will be the 10th year that the city has funded the organization. We are proposing, in the interest of maintaining a maintenance level budget, that the funds stay at $30,000, which was current for FY13. The organization, the organization, as the president and the co-director indicated earlier tonight, is $20,000 more than that, so an overall operating subsidy of $50,000. There is included in the supplemental, and I think it's right after all of the narrative that we pulled together, their request and the rationale for the $20,000 increase. Also in the Community Development Division budget is continued funding for the Tacoma Junction events. This was a program or an effort that was initiated on the part of by the Tacoma Junction Task Force, who wanted to activate the area to create bigger buzz, get more community building, provide some support to the businesses in that area, and in an effort to revitalize it. We contracted with Old Tacoma Business Association this year for that, and they've done the Food Truck Fridays. They've done, or about to begin, the Grant Avenue Market, which will be once a month. So there are 3 market days with that. And then a green, I want to say Earth Day, but it's not an Earth Day thing. It's a green festival that will be coming up soon. Kate will probably know the date.
I thought it was Earth Day, but
It has a different name that, anyway, so those are the things that they're proposing to do. We would like to continue that or in the interest of furthering the overall objectives of the Tacoma Junction Task Force, the OTBA has also addressed that in their request for funding. They are appreciative of it being included in the budget, but they've asked that it not be focused on the Tacoma Junction area, that it be used throughout their targeted area, which basically runs from the junction down to the DC line and then beyond that, for programming that could take place throughout the Main Street area. We're also looking, and this is new programming, setting aside some funding in the amount of $35,000 for feasibility analysis for what we've called strategic commercial redevelopment projects. We've identified 3 of them here just as examples. The first is the Tacoma Recreation Center on New Hampshire Avenue. The second would be the city-owned property in the junction. And the third is on New Hampshire Avenue, and I've forgotten the cross street all of a sudden, where the shoe store burned down several years ago. I think that's Eastern or no, it's Ethan Allen. Is it Ethan Allen?
It's just
Ethan Allen, south of Ethan Allen. What we're hoping to be able to do is to have some funding set aside so that we can work with property owners like this or evaluate the redevelopment potential of these properties. So, and that could range from doing a comprehensive parking analysis or site analysis to see, based on the current zoning restrictions and the lot coverage requirements with the new code, what is actually realistic to anticipate from an economic feasibility standpoint. Is the value, for example, is the value of the land such that you are going to have to go up multiple stories, or you're going to have it totally covered with a building, that kind of thing. In the case for the recreation center, feasibility analysis could be, what's the demand for recreation services in this particular area? And based on that demand, what kind of a facility, a new and expanded or replacement facility, what should that look like as far as the number of meeting rooms versus weight rooms versus, showers and facilities, that type of thing. It could also be used to develop or create sort of a conceptual redevelopment plan for a property owner like the one on New Hampshire Avenue that burned, to sort of encourage them to think about new possibilities for their property. That particular facility, for example, is it's a thriving commercial area, but it is in poor condition and could be better utilized as far as the ground that's available there. So we're kind of leaving it wide open, but basically what that would be, those funds would be spent on those types of feasibility studies for both publicly owned or privately owned property, and used to either take the next step for redevelopment of the property or encourage someone to make an investment that right now they may not be considering. Those are the most significant program changes or continued programming in the community development division's budget. The balance of our activities are, as noted in the management objectives, for example, providing technical assistance, partnering with local business associations, working to continue to promote and revitalize New Hampshire Avenue corridor, but also the other commercial areas in the community. A lot of coordination with agencies regarding transportation, economic development, neighborhood revitalization, and then all of the cultural programming is done with staff through this division as well.
Councilmember Grimes, did you have something in this section?
Yeah, I have a few comments. First, about feasibility studies. I would not like to see any feasibility studies that are too far in advance of the actual possibility of redevelopment. So while we all recognize that the Tacoma Park Recreation Center on New Hampshire Avenue is in sore need of something, rebuilding even, I'm not sure that's going to happen in the next few years. Right now it's in the master plan, I believe, as something to be funded by a developer who would come in based on the revitalization of the area brought by the Purple Line station and so on. So the point there is not to say yes or no about anything. It's to say we shouldn't do feasibility studies in advance of too far in advance of actually being able to do anything. Secondly, in existing business districts, I'd hate to see a feasibility study that would have as a result a strategy that would price out existing businesses that serve the communities that are served by a particular business area. So that's another comment there. So this is all leading me to say I'm not real happy, although I voted for it, that the city went in half on the feasibility study for the property at 6530 New Hampshire Avenue. In particular, what makes me unhappy about it is that staff essentially committed city funds to this without council authorization. So for any feasibility study in the future, whether, especially given what I said about doing things too far in advance of the actual possibility of doing work, I would like to see the feasibility studies brought as proposals to the council before there is any serious discussion with property owners, whether it's a property owner of a shopping mall or a particular property like 6530 New Hampshire Avenue. Also, I don't have the supplemental materials in front of me. I have very bad connectivity where I am to the internet. But there was in the budget this $250,000 for Tacoma Junction streetscape planning. Is this the proper time to ask about that?
I was going to do it during the, because I'm supposed to go through capital improvement programs too.
Do it now.
Okay, because I'll just say now that to me that is completely tied to what happens on the city lot there. You did mention a feasibility study, I believe, for the city lot. I'll say now I cannot see spending $250,000 on Tacoma Junction streetscape planning in FY14 simply because the status of the city lot is undetermined, and I don't see it as likely to be determined before the end of FY14. And it would seem to me pouring money down the drain to spend money on streetscape planning in any area, not just Tacoma Junction, when the status of commercial areas that are part of them, such as the Tacoma Junction lot, but perhaps also along New Hampshire Avenue, I would not spend any money on streetscape planning while commercial development is unsettled there. That applies to the rec center as well, given the potential of having commercial developers pay for this stuff. That's it.
Okay. Did you want to respond to anything?
Would you like to?
I would appreciate a response regarding bringing any feasibility study proposals to the council for green lighting before there are any serious commitments made to development partners.
And I was also thinking about whether the money was spent before it was authorized.
Just to clarify Councilmember Grimes' comments regarding the memorandum of agreement that the council recently entered into with the Potomac Conference for a feasibility study for the redevelopment of 6530 New Hampshire Avenue. No commitment was made on the part of staff regarding funding of that project at all until it was brought before the City Council, and the council made the final decision regarding whether or not they wanted to partner with the conference, and if they did, to what extent.
I'm speaking personally. I don't like to be put in the position of having to say no to essentially a very well-developed proposal. By well-developed, I don't mean good or bad. I mean it was very well. It was advanced. I don't like having to say no to an advanced proposal. I'd rather have the chance of saying yes or no to a proposal while it's still in a very preliminary state. You understand the distinction I'm making?
I understand the distinction, and we'll take that into consideration for future agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Seems counter to the thought of doing feasibility studies and holding off until something is ready to go.
Well, Councilmember Grimes was talking about being included in the initial preliminary stage as far as the conversation with developing the agreement in the first place.
And so far as I know, the council was not informed that there were any negotiations with the Potomac Conference regarding 6530 New Hampshire Avenue, the possibility of a feasibility study. If I missed something, I apologize, but I don't recall hearing anything about it until it was presented to us.
Councilmember Schultz.
Councilmember Grimes, not to prolong the conversation here, because obviously this is not the
Councilmember
subject
Schultz, I believe you have
of
the conflict of interest regarding 6530 New Hampshire.
what would be the conflict of interest?
Your involvement with the Enterprise Development Group, which is in a nascent partnership with the Potomac Conference.
There's no nascent partnership with anybody. They're simply part of the working group who are trying to give us some, working to give some advice on the feasibility of what we were talking about. But I take your point that if it comes in the future to allocating money and that economic development group is directly involved, rather than just sort of being an advisor, then I would recuse myself from that. Absolutely. But I also wanted to say that I think the working group made a point to bring the matter of 6530 before the City Council on more than one occasion before it came to the issue of actually providing some money for it.
But so my point is, going forward, Sarah Dane said that they would take it under consideration, whatever that means. So I've made my request there that the council be given a chance to weigh in very early in any kind of process of discussion of feasibility studies, since that's part of the proposal for FY14.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you.
I've got some more to say on something else.
We heard OTBA's request for $20,000, right? What is your position on that?
Perhaps
Do
it's
that
my
to me.
position. Sarah. Do you want me to respond?
That would be great.
Yeah, to me, we were trying very hard to keep a maintenance of effort budget, and so we put in the same amount as the current year, with the idea that this request came in a little bit later, obviously in the process, that you are going to be looking at the large grants, a variety of things, and to me it seemed like something that you can certainly weigh within the budget process, but it did not, I did not see it as an essential part of our support for OTBA, and so I did not include it in the base budget, in the base proposed budget.
Okay. I support generally OTBA, but I guess my concern is there are other commercial districts in the city. New Hampshire Avenue, Flower Avenue has a couple pockets, and the level of support that OTBA gives to these districts is very limited, I'm sorry. And so now that they're coming back to the council for more money that they want us to approve, and I just foresee that money going to the wards that they already primarily support. I'm not trying to put you. What would you say?
The Old Tacoma Business Association is very geographically focused. They have a specific district with a line around it that is part of their Main Street program, and as a result, their program activities are limited to that geographical area.
But aren't they doing programming in the Junction now?
The Junction is part of their service territory, for lack of a better word.
But wasn't the Junction added?
Nope.
No.
It was always part of it.
It's always been part of it. And part of the task force's recommendation, as I understand it, was to spend a little more attention to that particular area as far as programming. Historically, much but not all of the programming has been on the other end of the strip, kind of more in the middle where the farmers market is and the gazebo and things like that. So they do not, from an organizational standpoint, go out to Flower and Erie or a Long Branch or Maple Sherman or anything on New Hampshire Avenue. There is just one other business association in the community, and that's the Tacoma Langley Crossroads CDA. And they, unlike the Old Tacoma Business Association, they do not get any operating support from the City of Tacoma Park. And their budget's about $80,000.
Yes.
And I forgot to bring it with me, but there's a difference as well in terms of the number of businesses that are in these particular areas and things like that. Admittedly, they are different kinds of commercial areas, so they have different needs. But historically, the city has not funded anything beyond Old Tacoma Business Association.
Is there any update on the Phase 2 on the Tacoma parking lot at Tacoma Junction?
The analysis, or the work has all been done. Was done on Monday. They are in the process of finalizing their analysis, and then it will be forwarded to another individual to review to make sure that it's complete. And then we'll be getting it either the beginning of May, the middle of May, to see what the results are. We don't have any indication right now what they have found or what the recommendations may be. We, based on the results of that Phase 2, we are prepared to go to the next step, which would be to either could be Crossroads. If it's really bad, then we have to figure out a mediation strategy, which will be part of the Phase 2 report, I believe. If it's something that's more manageable, we're going to be bringing in a commercial appraiser to go through and look at the value of the lot, both from a lease perspective as well as a sale perspective, so that we can then move on to the next step where we solicit letters of interest, requests for proposals. Guys could decide to plant a for sale sign on the lot and see what happens. But we need the Phase 2 and the commercial valuation before we can go to that next step.
So why is that, if I may? What does it matter what its value is? In my opinion, and I believe this reflects the Tacoma Junction Task Force, what matters more is what the community wants to do with the space.
Based on my experience, it's important to have a value of the asset that you are transferring or developing. It has an impact in terms of leverage. It also has an impact in terms of the overall operating costs associated with the particular development.
Well, we don't know that we're going to develop it. It could be retained as community space.
That is an option that the council can make, or a decision that's an option the council has.
So if we do have to mediate, or we find out that under the ground it's polluted, why isn't there anything in the budget that would cover that?
Because it could be $23 million or $1,000. We don't really know yet. Our hope is that it's something that can be easily addressed, if it's even only just a cap where they don't go into the actual contaminated area, or if it ends up being something more serious, which I hope it's not, we would then explore resources from a state and federal level as far as mediation.
So the council needs to be prepared that it might be.
It might be bad.
Okay.
I'm hoping it's not. But yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. Right now, I would hate to hazard a guess as far as what the cost might be for remediation, because we won't know until later in May.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
There's several things, but don't want to dominate the conversation here too much. With regard to the OTBA, I was privileged to have some email conversations with Laura Barkley about a month ago about her request, because she had initiated contact with me. And when I asked her some questions about the OTBA's budget, and one of the things that I found out that the membership dues from members, in other words, unlike some associations where you just have to exist in order to be recognized as a member. OTBA makes a distinction between businesses that are and property owners that are members and those that aren't. Those that are members, their total income from business membership is about $8,000 a year. And I told her that I thought that given the extraordinary amount of benefit that the OTBA organization brings to the entrepreneurs in that whole stretch that they survey, if you will, that amount of money in proportion to all, other sources. Now, of course, they get a lot of money from the street festival and other activities in addition to the city, so it's just not the city. But that amount of money is very, very low. I mean, member dues vary depending on the nature of the business, are sometimes in the range of a few $100s. And it just, I made the point to her that a way to induce the city to participate with a larger contribution would be to induce first the business members to up their dues somewhat to a good deal more, because it's pretty hard for me, and I was just speaking for myself, to justify the city upping its ante when the members are contributing such a small amount. There wasn't any disputing between Laura Barkley and myself. We were just swapping ideas, and I just felt that that there needs to be some parity, I think, between the private sector and the public sector in the support of the OTBA, and I think that would facilitate our thinking on that, about the idea of increasing the money that we give to the OTBA on an annual basis.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I'm inclined to support Councilmember Schultz's comments, and maybe there's a way to incentivize greater business contribution by, matching more business contributions and more funding. Councilmember Grimes brought up this point about, do you do a feasibility analysis first, or do you develop a vision very far along of a project and then bring it to council and then move it forward? And I think the challenge for me is that the answer is somewhere in the middle, and it doesn't. My experience is it hasn't always felt right in terms of where we are in the middle, and that's because it's not, I know, always easy to plan these projects. My comment on the junction would be, and the city-owned lot, is that it's not clear to me that the city staff have enough direction from the council in terms of what to do next. And I did not support the Phase 2 environmental study because I think it made more sense to figure out what our interests were in the site before finding out that particular answer. But it hasn't closed off. Well, maybe it'll close off some options depending on what we find out. But I'm going to assume it's not going to close off too many options, that we're not going to find anything that's horrible. We're going to find stuff that's a concern. And any business partner is going to then have to deal with that concern for the site. We've been, I guess the part that I'd like to see is, and I think your intent is to do this, but is a stronger focus in terms of hours of the day by staff and the division on moving that site forward. So we heard a proposal from Blessed Coffee last year. We heard a proposal from the co-op last year. Those, as far as I know, are just sort of sitting there. And I guess I just want to make sure that we identify a timeline and a process, and we identify some council agenda items if there needs to be any resolution from council in terms of moving forward. I understand why feasibility projects are important. This one is, is quite expensive, and maybe there's some way to condition, the spending of that. And I know council would always approve a contract on something like this, but maybe there's a way to condition spending on it, on making some progress, on council making some decisions following the environmental survey, something like that. But I want to see us commit to you and us commit, with citizen engagement, to you to get some questions resolved that would allow the project to go forward, and simultaneously back from the department get that sense that staff are spending time trying to resolve this project. And essentially, I think we just need to pay more attention to this, and I guess the time is going to be now, because we're going to get this Phase 2 survey back. You don't need to respond to that. That's just a comment. And I don't have any other questions at this. I'm sorry. Let me just make these 2 points briefly. I hope that the supplemental materials that are provided tonight can go on the budget website on the city's website. That these are
They're there now.
They're there now. Thank you. And I note that the department's overall budget is 16% increase. Not all of that is staff. And I'd just like to get not now, but just try to understand that later on. I think the department's budget goes from 1.322 to 1.532, which is...
Is it estimated expenditure or budgeted? Yeah, that's estimated expenditure?
Yes. The adopted only goes up from 1.5 to 1.
Goes up 2.3%.
Yeah.
2.3%.
So why is the estimated budget so much lower than the adopted budget in the last year? What did we not?
I had a lot of
Not
vacant
vacant
positions.
So it's position related? Okay.
Primarily.
Okay. Thank you.
And
This
if I,
kind of answers the other question, too, about some of the work, some of the planning.
if I can just say that it would seem that not tonight, but we might need to have a little bit of a discussion about kind of the process of going forward on potential economic development and understanding the place of feasibility studies or other pieces of the puzzle, so that we have maybe a little bit better common understanding of how these things work in the types of situations, whether it be the crossroads, as thinking about Purple Line and things going forward there, whether it be other parts of New Hampshire Avenue with the work that we've put in so far on 6530, or down at the Spanos property where we were talking about where the shoe store burned down, or the junction, or, I think people have a sense now that the OTBA area, Old Town in particular, is really moving along and doing well, and maybe a threshold has been crossed in terms of what's happening there. But I'm not sure that people have a good understanding of how this process works, and the pieces, and the timing, and the way that you have to do one thing before another, or if there's flexibility to do it in a different order or hold off on timing. So I think it might be good to have a session on that, to just have a broad understanding, because I hear some dissonance in people's understandings.
There's that, and there's also, I think, as we look forward to the coming several years, we're kind of at a different place for economic development. As you said, kind of the Old Town area has done pretty well, but recently, Purple Line finally looks like it's moving forward. Maybe there's some chance for some funds and that kind of thing from the state for some of these other areas of the town. I think it'd be very helpful to kind of take a fresh look, talk out what the planning process is, when different kinds of feasibility studies are appropriate, and at what point, and how that works. I think it'll be a good discussion.
And not to seem like we're going 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or 3 steps back on the junction, with frustration with wanting to get things going and putting money forward, and then going, no, is that the right thing, and stepping back from it. Just a good understanding would be helpful.
Well, and I think one of the things that was tough here is, Sarah proposed this money for the Tacoma Junction based on the task force report, but the task force report hasn't even been quite adopted by the council and directive given. So I think that it's one of those things we'd love to get to those understandings and figure out, the right direction.
Okay.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, I like the idea that the mayor just put forward of having let's call it a comprehensive discussion of economic development prospects and approaches. It takes us in the direction of having an economic development policy for the next few years, rather than just a set of projects without the policy level coordination. So yeah, I definitely would endorse that. And I will also say I agree with Councilmember Schultz's earlier comment regarding the Old Tacoma Business Association and the level of membership dues. My own business is a member of the Business Association, even though I don't have any clients anywhere near Tacoma Park. I think the problem, the challenge that the Business Association faces is not that any individual business is paying too little by way of dues, not paying a fair level of dues. The challenge is that unlike the Crossroads Development Authority, you're not required to be a member if you're a business. And there are many businesses that do benefit from the Business Association's work who are not members. And then one other point, which is that a large proportion of the change in the landscape in Old Tacoma is on the District of Columbia side, with finally the Tacoma Central building going up on Carroll Street between Maple and Cedar Streets, where the Busboys and Poets would be located, with Trove, with Supergirl, other businesses going in, that I hope and believe will give the Business Association a very strong argument in those discussions with Muriel Bowser that Rocco Casagrande and I guess it was Laura Barclay there mentioned that they're having. So it would be very nice to have some kind of parity in the operating subsidies coming from the District of Columbia. Thank you.
And I'll just add one other point, which is that I want to remind folks that part of my testimony at the County Council budget hearing had to do with the need for additional assistance from the county for economic development. And so anything that we do, we need to bring them in. We could potentially get the Economic Development Director, Steve Silverman, here to talk about any commitments that he might be able to make or requests that we might be able to make that they could fulfill. So I think a comprehensive economic development discussion would be very helpful. Do we have anything else to do in your budget?
Oh, we're not even through the divisions yet.
Well, and we've been at this for an hour and 20 minutes.
I know.
Maybe we can
I'm more than
get through the
willing to
rest of this.
step off and share the limelight with my co-workers.
That's
We
generous
just
of
have
you.
affordable housing, right?
Okay, the very last division is affordable housing. The total for this one is $181,509. Budget's basically $361 higher than it was in FY13. No change in personnel. We're at .60 FTEs. Primary focus in this particular division is on affordable housing, both both rental as well as owner occupied, and the preservation of that and the enhancement of affordable housing. The biggest expenses here are for services and charges, and that's primarily with the capacity building program. And as we mentioned earlier, and is also addressed in the supplemental, an additional or a continuation of funding for the exterior home repair program that we're currently working on in partnership with Habitat for Humanity.
Questions? Seeing none? Thank you. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
Capital improvement.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. operating budget is just sort of part of the budget that the folks in my department administer or used to further projects that have been identified by the council as being priorities. In the non-departmental budget, which will be addressed later this evening, we have $35,500, 25 of which is for the emergency assistance program, which we have already spoken about. And in the supplemental information, I tried to portray graphically how those funds are being used, who's accessing them on a ward basis, as well as how the dollars are being expended.
Is that enough money?
Right now, it's perfectly fine, because we're getting, I think we have about $19,000 in additional funds that have been donated by the community for this purpose. So between the two, based on our current spending habits or spending trends, we should be comfortable. The other thing in the non-departmental are the an additional $10,500 for Arts and Humanities Commission. That's where we do the Poet Laureate, the stipend for the exhibitions director, do a lot of the arts programming that we have both here in the auditorium as well as in other locations within the building and in the community. So we also have funds through the special revenue budget. And not to go into a lot of detail on that, but that's $155,000 total. A small amount of that is for the Safe Routes to School program, where we'll be wrapping up the grant that expires the end of December. Some of that is capital, and a small amount is for operating expenses, and that is $45,000. Or $45,000, and then we have our Community Development Block Grant Program, which has been earmarked for a number of projects, including $97,000 roughly for rebuilding together to do extensive capital or renovations or repairs for properties that are in poor condition.
Special revenue fund.
Special revenue fund.
Yeah, sometimes it's not labeled. It's on page 119.
Yeah. I don't see rebuilding.
Rebuilding together would be a single-family home
Yep.
rebuilding together program. The Crossroads Community Food Network has been allocated $8,000 through our public service portion of those block grant funds for a job training program, a mentoring program based on food production. Montgomery Housing Partnership is receiving funding for the second year for a homework club based out of the property on 7610 Maple Avenue. And the YMCA is receiving additional funding, again, for a second year for group therapy sessions for at-risk youth over at the middle school. So those are essentially our special revenue fund projects. And again, that dollar amount totals $155,000. And then last but not least, our capital projects. We have proposed $515,000 in capital improvement projects. I do not know what page it is on in the budget. Page 111.
That's the beginning.
Well,
That's the beginning, yeah.
Oh, we are under streets and sidewalks in that category, if you look at the purple bars.
page
113.
113.
Okay. And I'm just going to run through these and then answer any questions that you might have. Neighborhood Commercial Center improvements, we're requesting $100,000. This would give us an opportunity to make a variety of improvements identified in partnership with the community for the 5 commercial areas that are in Tacoma Park. Again, that would be Long Branch, the Crossroads CDA, Erie and Flower, Maple and Sherman, and the Old Town, or Tacoma Junction and Old Town area. We've done this before, and it ranged everywhere from the function and the Junction concerts that we held over at the co-op, or next to the co-op, to benches, to landscaping, to some signage. How the funds would actually be used would vary depending upon the interests of the property owners in that immediate area, but also the community. Safe Routes to School Sidewalk Program, we have $37,000 left over from our current award, and those funds will be targeted for a streetscape project or a sidewalk project that is wrapping up on Jackson. Public art, we're requesting $20,000 in public art to continue an ongoing program that has been ongoing on paper primarily, but that we request to allow us to do as yet undefined public art project in the community. We would issue a request for proposals if the funding were allocated, and then based on the submissions and in partnership with Arts and Humanities Commission and the Council, a public art piece could be installed. Could be multiple pieces. The recent one that we are in the process of installing is up in Flower Avenue and Piney Branch Road, the Azalea sculpture by Howard Conley. Ethan Allen Gateway Streetscape Project, we're requesting $105,000 that we hope to be able to use to leverage additional funding for planned improvements in the Ethan Allen Gateway area. As Councilmember Grimes has pointed out, we've included funding for the Tacoma Junction redesign. I regret using the word streetscape because that's really not what we're talking about. As noted in the supplemental materials, we're looking at going through and doing a comprehensive / holistic approach to evaluating some of the issues that were identified by the task force in terms of parking, traffic flow, pedestrians, how we might be able to improve or enhance bike use in that area, evaluating stormwater requirements, a whole slew of things in terms of what could be done to make that area flow better, both from a pedestrian as well as a vehicular area. So the implication is that by using the word streetscape, we're talking about putting in benches and trees. That's not necessarily what we're looking at. We're looking at undertaking a comprehensive, again, design process that would address those various issues that were included in the task force report. I've included in the supplemental the executive summary from that report, and if you go through and you look at it, it talks in a variety of different ways about the need to improve the functionality of that area. And that could be traffic analysis, it could be a variety of things. The cost seems high, but based on our experience with the Ethan Allen Gateway project, in terms of the level of detail and the complexity of the analysis that could potentially take place here, as well as including the community in the discussion, it's a fairly realistic number. In the event that the council decides that they do not want to do this at this point in time, I've included in the supplemental material a proposal that the funds be instead set aside for a commercial rehab or a commercial renovation program that would give us some flexibility and allow us to continue efforts that we have started in many of the commercial areas in terms of facade improvement, signage, window replacement, painting, things like that. The advantage in using general funds for the home repair program we discussed earlier, is that there would not be some of the restrictions that we currently have on the Community Development Block Grant funded commercial program that will be expiring in June, or in past efforts with accessing funding through the state through the Community Legacy Program. And then the right-of-way trail development has been proposed by staff in an amount of $25,000 to go through and evaluate what the possibilities are in terms of taking these paper streets that are on the map, but when you go down there, there's no road, and using them to increase connectivity between neighborhoods, commercial areas, streets, looking at it from a pedestrian standpoint as well as possibility for biking, and evaluating landscaping options in terms of using native species, things like that. Part of the process would be identifying all of those paper streets. Some of them are quite obvious, but there are more out there than we stumble across them periodically, and a majority of them seem to be in Ward 3.
And are there not a lot of those that people consider to be their own property at this point?
That would be part of the conversation. It would have to be
I
something.
imagine it would
Yeah,
be.
it really would.
Just
Yeah.
checking.
Yeah, and in partnership with Public Works, because frankly, there are implications in terms of long-term maintenance. And if this were funded as we go through, say Paper Street is identified and it doesn't, for whatever reason, make sense to continue it to have it as paper road or improve it, then it opens up the discussion about how do we dispose of this because it's surplus property.
It goes back to the adjacent property owners.
And then they can arm wrestle over, does my shed need to be moved 3 feet or whatever, but yeah.
And if it's of any help, I have the map, the color-coded map, when we went through all of those, I don't know how many years ago.
That would be great, because we haven't seen anything like that.
And it's a large one.
Even better. That would be good.
Email me.
And the last but not least capital project is, that's proposed, are pay stations for the Old Town parking areas. We're looking at a single pay station rather than single meters where you go. That would be solar powered. And we have priced out the purchase and the installation to be about $15,000 per station. And ideally, this would be something that would start in the junction area and could trickle on down to other parking lots or parking areas, existing or proposed, in the balance of the Old Tacoma area.
It's about time.
I know, it takes a while.
And I have one question. Boy. Oh, Flower and Piney Branch.
I agree.
Was that Seth?
Or it might have been seagulls. He's in San Diego. Could be seagulls.
No, I'm in a hotel, so here.
I went through Flower and Piney Branch today, and a backhoe was digging up the whole corner of new concrete. Do you know why?
No, but I'm really glad you told me about it. We will investigate. That could be a good thing or a bad thing.
And they completely, by the time I came back through, they had completely reformed the whole thing.
I think
There was
that-
like 50 feet of form at the edge of the sidewalk at the whole corner.
Was it bigger or smaller?
I don't know.
Richie Avenue.
There's ADA stuff there.
But that was just done.
Just today, no, they moved right up the Flower.
Yeah, Piney
and-
Branch has been being worked on, so they went that far, huh?
It's Montgomery County or State Highway.
It's State Highway.
Yeah.
Stay out there. Okay, I was surprised to see it, because what they were digging up was brand-new concrete.
Wow.
Well,
Should we tell them that the money that was used to put in that old concrete was state funding? That's
I'm
crazy.
sure it wouldn't matter.
We will investigate that. Thank you for the information.
Yeah.
yeah, they moved up, they were down at Sligo Creek Parkway earlier this week, and now they're
Moved up the hill.
up the hill, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for all that information.
I'm sorry it takes so long.
Oh, Councilmember Smith.
Thank you.
Um,
Question regarding the paper trail or roads or whatever you want to call them. If the council approves this request for $25,000, you're requesting $25,000 for subsequent years until FY18?
It would have to be done in phases. The initial phase would be to identify them and to do whatever survey work might be needed to meet with the community to go through and talk about what their interests might be and what the options are. And then we're anticipating that it may grow or be phased in over time, which is why we have it in multiple years in the capital budget.
So if we green light it, it's going to cost us a total of $125,000.
No. Well, it could, but the way the capital budget is it's a 5-year projection in terms of projects, so you kind of get a chance to see what the overall impact could be, but you approve it each individual fiscal year. And the funding amounts could vary as well as the funding sources.
And I guess it's the same with the Tacoma Junction streetscape improvements of $800,000
Correct.
for FY15.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Now, Councilmember Grimes?
Yes, I have a couple of comments. One on Tacoma Junction, I already made some remarks earlier. I'll just add to it that we're still hoping to get a crosswalk installed by the State Highway Administration that will take some time for them to install if they ever do it. And that will change the dynamic of pedestrian use of the junction in particular. And it would be good to have some experience with the changes that creates before we undertake any comprehensive examination of flows and so on in the junction. The second comment regards paper streets. I do have some experience investigating them, and I think that if you do this systematically, you run the risk of opening up. We used the term can of worms a few weeks ago. I'll use that term again. There are paper streets that are infringed on by private properties. I know of 2 instances of this in Ward 2. And in one case, at least, I would like to see the city abandon its paper street, its right-of-way to the property owners, perhaps selling it. But I haven't raised that point because the time hasn't been right. There's another case where there's a paper street next to the house of a former city manager of Tacoma Park, where that property of the former city manager fences in parts of the paper street. There's a new owner of that property. But that kind of situation, and I should say also the house next door, part of the lawn is the paper street. I think there are probably a fair number of examples of that in Tacoma Park. So that if we do go, what I'm going to suggest is that if we do go forward with any kind of examination of the public usability of paper streets, it be done on a selective basis rather than a systematic one. Selective being based on where there's a probability of actual benefit rather than just to see what's out there. So that's a comment. Thank you.
And I'll just add to that comment that I don't know what year it was, but it was when I was on the council that we went through all of the paper streets and discussed all of them and the possibilities and investigated some issues, and there were some encroachments, and there was even one where on Boyd Avenue where there was a legal document drawn. There had been a legal document. There was an additional legal document in terms of who could do what, and there were issues with the sale of a house where use had been happening, and the sale didn't happen, and other things happened, and people were told to remove things, and so there was a whole process that went on for months dealing with paper streets, and that's why I have the map.
So you're going to handle these issues?
I know the history of many of them.
I mean, look at it this way. If nothing else, if this project were approved and we went through the process, you could eventually get rid of all those paper streets that aren't being used by disposing them or splitting up the ownership so that when somebody does some dumping or they're invasive plants, it's not the city's responsibility to go and take care of it.
Right now, it's the city's responsibility to maintain these properties, and that could be expensive or cause a problem. Yeah.
Just open them all up, make them streets, right?
We'll take a break. Just say, break. are going to do general government, non-departmental, and communications, and we're going to zip through them and flag any issues that
You can come back to it.
we need to come back to so that we don't stay here until tomorrow morning. So let's do general government.
All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to go through the general government departmental budget. As you mentioned, I'll try and go through this. There are a couple spots through this section where I'll call on somebody else to speak to the item because there might be something that's specific, but I really do want to hit the highlights. And as the mayor said, if there's some particular thing that seems to be raising questions or that you want us to come back to, very happy to come back on a subsequent evening and go into the item in more detail. For the general government departmental budget, I'll go through the sections, but just mention the highlights. The first section is legislative. It's the city council and related matters. It's pretty much standard with the one exception that it's an election year coming up, and so there will be some more information as we get closer to that about choice of machinery and operations, and that's something that we've budgeted for. It's possible we might need some more monies for that, and we'll be looking at that and talking with you as we find out more information. But essentially, the general government legislative division is about the same. For the general management division, which is essentially the city manager's budget, the most significant item within this division is the proposal to create a 2-year pilot program for this effort to do outreach and service to residents, primarily seniors. We would hire a half-time management assistant on a 2-year contract to establish the program, coordinate with other staff. Sarah mentioned some of the entities within the HCD department that do a lot of outreach and service. We've got service in the police department, we have service in recreation, and then there's many agencies and in the county and nonprofits that we would connect with. Within my proposal is that in the second year, that person with the council and others that have been associated with that effort would do an evaluation of it, see if it's the right kind of a thing for a half-time position. Is it structured correctly? Does it need to serve a slightly different mix, or should it's not needed? When I've done some discussions with other providers that do this kind of thing, they all said that they started kind of at a small level to see how it works, and you end up wanting to tailor it very specifically to the community. So for this proposal, it's a half-time position, it's a half-time FTE. I don't consider it an ongoing FTE because it's the 2-year position and we don't know what we would want to do with it after that time. Other elements within the city manager's office and also with the legal expenses, just wanted to mention that we'll have collective bargaining agreements renegotiated in the coming year. They're both the ASCME and the Local 400 Police collective bargaining agreement expire at the end of this year. Finance is no change. We love our finance department, and they will continue to do what they're doing in exactly the same way.
We love our finance department. They know and love being here at this hour.
Yes, they do.
This is the highlight of her year.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mentioned with the legal budget, we will have labor attorney costs for the negotiations with the 2 labor unions. I don't see a substantial change overall with this division. and that may change as the council thinks about how it wants to handle that. I do want to take a few moments and call Abel to come up to the desk and talk a little bit about our information systems budget. There's a couple things that are highlights this year related to information systems. The first is that in kind of, obviously technology is changing fast. Abel's got gray hairs because every day some staff person comes to the city and says, oh, I got a new mobile device, or I got something else, and I want to make it work. And I think that that's happening everywhere. It, in some respects, should be encouraged because we find better ways of doing things, but it is a challenging process for our for our technicians. We've got some very old software. We've got a real mix of hardware. We have some things on the cloud. And I feel pretty strongly that we need an assessment of what we have in the city in terms of hardware, software, what kinds of things are appropriate for us going forward in the city, to give us some direction about what we need to purchase, how we need to staff, those kinds of things. And so I'm proposing a $20,000 effort to have a consultant work with us and do that assessment. And I think that will end up being very important for some of even the capital program items that we have for this coming year. And Abel, why don't you talk a little bit about what you have in the capital program and any other things that you think are particularly important?
Yeah, there are at least three projects there. Two are equipment replacement, and equipment/software we're due to replace our phone system. It's been online since 2002. And there's been a lot of enhancements. We have a hybrid system where we do some voice over IP, and we take some of the technologies available to us. But here in the building, we're using traditional phone wiring. We are looking at improving the instruments, the actual phone devices. The technology has changed so much, even the speakers on the phones and things like that, conferencing features that we have, and integration with wireless and hands-free technology for our clerical staff. They don't have to be tied to the phone. They can put a headset on and do some things. Our current system doesn't do that. And those are the things we're looking for in the new equipment. I'm thinking that the cost of the new equipment would probably it's going to be a lot less. Our current amount there in the ERR is based on our initial investment, and I guess over time we've added whatever was appropriate. But technology has changed, and the equipment is a lot smaller. I think it's going to be less components. Instead of having 3 servers or some PBX equipment hanging on the wall, it's all going to be on a computer inside our rack. So things have changed quite a bit as far as that goes. The other is the accounting software, which we actually were scheduled to replace back when we had the budget shortfalls, and we made that thing go away for a while. And we really are behind on our software and the things it can do. In fact, our current software provider has stopped developing. They've turned over to the Windows environment or the Windows operating system. So a lot of the enhancements and product features that they've been working on are all on SQL and Microsoft operating system. And that enhances a lot of the things with integration with Microsoft Office and those kind of products that staff uses. We can export to Excel and things like that, print locally and things like that works in a Microsoft environment all seamlessly. It takes an extra effort now because we're doing it the old-fashioned way. While it's very stable, it's a Unix operating system, the platform that we're using. It's time to move on. And their enhancements have gone to a paperless environment, which is something that we want to do here. A lot of the workflows have been improved in their software. Things like getting emails when somebody has a request for leave. when somebody's leaf balance goes a certain length, when a PO is ready to be approved. All those kind of workflows are built in now into the purchasing modules. We're not using that. We don't have that because we have equipment that should have been replaced 5 years ago, basically. The cost of replacing or upgrading what we have is considerably less than going out and going and starting fresh. I estimate probably $400,000 for a brand new system off the shelf for somebody else that has to be customized and has to incorporate all our database, to probably just under $100,000 for upgrading and enhancing what we currently have with our current provider. During last summer, when I was looking at some of these figures, it was like $60,000 to upgrade what we currently have. Of course, I want to do enhancements. We want to have more enhancements than we currently have. We want to take advantage of the enhancements that we don't have, that they've migrated to, that they've added to their product, and that'll probably add a little bit more money, but still be considerably less than going out on the street and finding something new. I think the decision has to be made. We haven't made that. But our folks are asking and screaming for better financial software or improvements to our financial software. The online features of the financial software that's available from the same vendor are considerably greater than what we're doing now. The third thing is the data center or the server room. I know that we went through the walkthrough. Folks had a chance to look at our server room or phone closet /
It was scary.
Yeah.
It got worse since you saw it, and unfortunately, we had to do some kind of emergency upgrades to some AC system in there, but we really do need to redo that. And there are some options to move some of the things off-site as part of some of the hardware related to the cable grant and integration with that. So there's some assessment to be done with that, but we certainly need to get this done. The $75,000 that we're estimating would come from the cable grant funds, capital funds.
And there we're talking about a design and build kind of concept where we have somebody come in and design something. What we have now is just a room that we've basically taken over. We've adopted this room. It had all the communication things in there. It had all the Verizon cable, and our phone system was there. So we just started adding racks and adding computers and the wiring associated with it. And the cable management is very lacking. The lighting is very lacking. We do have AC there, but we really have outgrown the electrical and the cooling capacity of that room. With a remediation, we've had a remediation of the problem, but it's not a design. It's just something that we've added more cooling because we need more cooling, and those are the challenges we have there.
Yep. The final thing just to mention is that, and part of that is to recognize that a lot of what the Information System Services Division does support our cable television operations with the wiring and a variety of things. So there is a way that if there are cable operating grant funds, that can help pay for a lot of the IT services in terms of staffing that we have. Provided we have a negotiated agreement with Montgomery County to have operating funds increased for cable, I would then recommend the hiring of a half-time administrative assistant for the IT division, because right now they try to do a little bit of everything, and they could use somebody who can help take work assignments, do the purchasing, keep the records of the various equipment and that kind of thing. Again, it's not something I would recommend unless we have an agreement on operating grant funds related to cable.
Yeah, and I can emphasize that the computer needs of the cable department have totally more than doubled since IT even got an assistant. Back when we got an assistant, was in 2005, we were not even in digital. I think cable had one computer to do the texting that gets flashed on the screen when you're doing a live recording. Since then, we've got everything is digital. All the production, all their editing, all their footage that they store, everything, and the computers that support the editing has also been added. It's all a Mac environment over there, and we're coming up to speed in learning the Mac environment. But additional help in clerical for customer service, for some of these other clerical type needs would free up IT staff from doing that and get them to do the technical stuff, get them to put more hands on computers, basically.
Are there any questions for Abel while he's
Yeah. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for being here with us tonight at this late hour. And you must revel in the thought that you're not the last one.
And the air conditioner's back.
That's right.
Yeah. That's for a good reason. I want to answer your questions.
I guess my first question is, I was almost late here getting back from the break because none of the council members can get in the door out here. And that happens periodically. Is there some way we can fix that so our security cards work through the door?
Yeah, that can be changed. It's a Thursday, so not supposed to be here on a Thursday. And that's probably what's happening. We're going to get cable guys to help us out. They also had to open the outside doors because they were closed at 9:30.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's just a programming thing.
I just wanted to heckle you because I knew you were here tonight. Yvonne may remember when she first got here, I was concerned with the quality of our software, our financial software, and had suggested that we take a look at it at that time. And I would suggest that this provides us another opportunity that we should really review the software and not just upgrade with what we have, but look at what's available out there, because I know there are other products on the market that may be more robust and better for the city in the long run. If we're going to have some transition, it might be a good time to transition to new software. And I say that knowing well that Yvonne would probably need some extra money to do that transition. It was actually to a new software product, but I think it would be prudent to take a look at what's available if we're going to be doing a upgrade anyways. Okay. Other than that, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah. In management objectives under in your division says test off-site storage of critical city software applications and data files by performing 2 disaster recovery events per year. Is that something that gets done twice a year?
It was done this year, the first time, beginning of the year. Yep.
Because I guess my question is really, when you read about all the crazy disasters every day going on somewhere in the United States, buildings blowing up and stuff like that, I think the natural concern is that if some sort of disaster occurred within this building, what are our off-site backup capabilities?
Currently, the only thing we tested was our financial software, but our email software is also off-site too.
Is there a plan or a need, or from your point of view, to do more of stuff to get it off-site, someplace physically distant? Is that
some stuff is also already some things besides that is also being backed up.
Right.
All of our web page content is off-site. We have the financial software, the storage of some of the library stuff, and everything is cloud ready, so we could migrate more.
okay?
We're also looking at making the connections over to Public Works so that there's some
redundancy
so
over
like
there.
if there's a problem with this building, we can operate out of Public Works fully.
Okay,
That's some-
sure. And the other was the last one here, enhanced community center wireless capabilities. We're in this building. How are we doing with that situation? Is that satisfactory now to you?
Well, I would say is, greatly improved from this time last year. But we want to add access to staff wireless access to staff. And it would probably be using the same radios, but with authentication and things like that, they would be connecting to our network, not to the public network, and that's what we haven't added yet.
You haven't gotten to that yet.
Right, and we want to enhance also Public Works with wireless and the rec center with wireless. So those are two things that we want to. I mean, you go anywhere else and you got wireless, so why not the city go?
No, I understand. That's why I'm asking. I just, I think that's something that, a good thing, obviously, but, like, these things do take some time. That's all I had, I think.
Councilmember May.
Thank you. This is a comment for further information that could be provided in writing. I don't really understand why we have 160 digital phones and 130 cell phones and 200 mailboxes. That's clearly a duplication in terms of the ability of technology to be with people all the time. And my personal preference would be to see us reduce the number of desk lines, but I'd like to see some follow-up information on why that current level of equipment is justified, if it is, or if there's an option to start reducing one of those sources of mobile access or fixed line access. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. My question is regarding the number of help desk calls. Actual FY12 was 3,700. You project FY14 to be 5,000. Why do you think there are going to be so many more
Good
calls
question.
for assistance?
Yeah, I'm planning that with the administrative assistant we're going to have, we're going to just do better documentation of them. I don't think we don't capture as a great percentage of the calls we get. We just go and do
we
stuff.
actually stop them in the hallway when we need them. So in terms of actually recording them and making them be in priority order, we are not there.
And the initiative here is that we want to get some software where staff can do their own request entry, and we'll have the administrative assistant monitor that and manage that. So I know we'll be capturing more.
Okay.
I'm hoping.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Grimes, let me check with you.
You can hear him over the air. All of a sudden, the air's full blast. He's gone.
Okay. I'll just end your portion with a recollection back to, I'm not sure how many years ago, but I'll say 10, maybe a little more than that, 12, 14 years. There was no IT budget. There was no computer budget. There was none
It
of...
was Able doing code enforcement and IT at night.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was... computers were purchased out of departmental budgets with extra funds, I think. So it's amazing to see the change. I won't even label it progress. I'll just label it change. To the point where now it's we have 65 servers, just all of this complexity. I think in the end it probably makes it so that the same number of people can probably attempt to manage more work than before, and the expectation on the part of the public for the responsiveness of staff to demands for work has gone up exponentially along with it. It used to be that the expectation for a response for an issue was days or weeks, and now if it's not a day, it's an hour, it's a minute. People want responsiveness, and trying to manage all that can get pretty complex. And so I can understand the need for within your area having to manage some of those administrative things that currently it's just the people who are being stopped in the halls to deal with the issues and not being able to do what you need to do to keep track of things and prioritize things.
I think customer support has suffered a little bit overall, and some of the planning and strategic things that have to happen may also you just don't have time for that kind of stuff. It's sad, but now we have 24 response time is 24 hours. That's what we say, but you go somewhere and people say, "Did you get my text?" So yeah, I got your text, but I'm doing 2 other things before that, and I don't plan to get to your text till maybe tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
I added up all the hardware items that you're responsible for throughout the city. Printers, laptops, telephones, cells, and it comes to 730 different instruments based on that actual FY12 number. So that's a lot of babies to keep track of.
I don't think that also includes people's personal cell phones that they want to synchronize with our email.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it doesn't. Because I know I've wasted a lot of your time trying to help get the things coordinated.
We've done some bonding. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you want to say anything about City Clerk's office? Oh, okay. I'm skipping over HR for just a moment to City Clerk, where Jesse can say, "Oh, it's so great to have an extra assistant."
It's really
the
making a
.45
yes,
FTE.
My .45 person is really helping me move things along, things that have been languishing for a while. She is reorganizing the file system. We've been able to get the old council minutes out to do the digitizing project. That's on its way, and it's making a huge difference. And I really appreciate having that extra slightly less than half position. It's made a huge difference.
Good.
And I will say that, I have the other half of the management assistant that Sarah does, and it has been wonderful. It's one of these things where, until you have somebody really good, you don't realize how much stuff can finally get done, and it is wonderful. So that's been a terrific area of progress. Alexis, would you like to come up to the desk? We'll do HR and then non-departmental.
Can I just ask something
Sure.
of Jesse while Alexis is making her way up here? And that is that you are certainly among the most important members of the city staff, as playing the part of city clerk, and yet you probably have among the smallest offices on the whole 3rd floor of the building. And every time I enter or attempt to enter your doorway, I just am always struck by how you've managed to organize yourself so that you can breathe. And I just want to say that I just don't think it's right, and I do think you need to have better space.
Well, but getting some of the actually the new clerical assistant is helping me need less space in my office. So I think there'll be some progress. I mean, I'm all for having more space. I'd like to have, Susie's office maybe, but
Well, don't be
no.
too humble here. This is not the time for humility.
Have you applied for that position?
I just want the office, not the position.
We'll just take that empty office next to hers.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, HR has kind of taken over.
We have.
And while we're doing a little housekeeping here, if I don't need the answer now, but if somebody can come up with the answer why on page 29 on legislative, there's no money in the supplies budget and the miscellaneous is way up. So you ready?
We'll find out.
So let's go ahead with HR.
All right. So Alexis, maybe you can talk just a minute about kind of what you've done in HR, and then we can go on to non-departmental.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. The HR department, over the past 9 months now, we've really been focusing on cleaning things up, I'm sure you can imagine. really trying to get systems in place and to make sure that we have the internal procedures there so that we can function as a full-service department. I think one of the things that was discussed in last year's budget meeting by our former city manager was that she wanted to make sure that the HR department was able to assist with recruiting and to be able to really do orientations and things of that nature. We are implementing an online applicant tracking system for recruiting so that we can stop getting 200 emails for one particular position and not have to forward them all over to the managers that are doing the hiring and all of that other stuff. This particular system is actually going to piggyback off of the current performance appraisal system that we're using. So it's actually not going to cost us that much. I think we're looking at about $3,000 for that, and we actually have over $3,000 in credit. So we're kind of getting it for free. So that's a really good deal there. We are also working on the policies for the city, for all of the employees, for an employee manual. We have completed phase 1 just about, and we are beginning phase 2, working with the attorneys. That is going to include the things that need to be adjusted as far as the city code. So we're looking into that, and of course specifically related to the personnel procedures. What else do we need to discuss? Really no changes other than the fact that we exist now. Last year this time we did not exist. So of course FTEs and things like that aren't going to change. The budget pretty much is static. It's only going to increase by about $5,000 total. Most of that's due to the to benefits and things like that. For management objectives, some of the things that need to be taken care of would be to train staff on the online performance management system. We've gotten a lot of requests for help on how to use that program. So we're going through and looking at that to see exactly what's needed, how is it set up, how do we need to make changes to the setup so that that can be improved. I did already speak about the online recruiting system. The orientation program is another big piece, and we're working with the management assistant that's working with Sarah and with Susie so that we can develop a orientation program so that the employees feel like they really know what's going on in the city and with their benefits and, you know, who to contact for what, who's this person, who's that person, because people have had conversations with the new police chief and didn't know that he was the police chief. So it's important to know who it is that you're talking to when you come on board. Workers' comp, I definitely want to address that. I know that we had spoken a couple of weeks ago about the workers' comp. We actually have received our mod rate, which tells us exactly what our percentage is going to be for the premiums. We went from a 1.0, which is an even amount, to a 1.26, which gives us a 26% increase with flat dollars. So we're looking at a quote of about $570,000 versus the $460 that we initially budgeted. So that'll be something for reconciliation. I did actually speak with our broker today, so we may be trying to find some other options to help us to reduce the workers' comp costs. With that said, with workers' comp, I do want to let you know that we have a up and running safety program to really hone in on the incidents. We're focusing really right now on safety culture to make sure that employees know that they need to report incidents, even if they don't think that they're injured. And that's very key to making sure that we're able to control the cost of the workers' comp claims. Some other things that we're going to be doing include safety topics on a monthly basis, and we'll make that specific to the different departments, because the police department and the admin folks are not going to have the same safety issues. We're doing that, and we're also looking at having some training done for staff members. The next thing would be the Wellness Committee. That is also up and running. We actually just had our first meeting last Wednesday, and they are also going to focus on overall wellness, so that will also affect our workers' comp premiums, and then also general wellness to include family life issues, financial things, things through our EAP, to include family resources and health issues, nutrition, exercise, you name it. We're really trying to get a whole, full approach so that employees aren't just coming to work, doing their work, and still dealing with all the issues that they have at home. So we're trying to make it a robust program. I think that is it.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'm curious, where you're proposing to reduce the average time to hire from 95 days to 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's terrific, but I cannot imagine how you're going to be able to do that.
It's possible because we are going to have the online recruiting system, and the way that works is we have questions that we can set up automatically, and those questions will automatically filter out some of the candidates, so there's fewer candidates to have to review. If you go from 250 candidates to look at to 75 or even 60 candidates, that reduces your time for just sitting there and having to go through all of that. There'll be less time because we don't have to copy papers and send them over to Public Works and have Public Works take the time to look at it. They can log on, take a look at the candidates, thumbs up, do their comments, everything right there on the computer, and everything filters back over to HR, so we see everything real time.
Candidates won't be sending in resumes, they'll just be, or what the old-fashioned paper resume is no longer a part of this process?
We're going to do away with those at some point. We are going to set up, and we have this included in our budget as well, a online applicant center that's actually going to be in the HR department. So if someone does not have access to a computer, they can actually come up to the HR department and we'll be able to assist them with filling out an application. It really is a very simple process. If they have a resume and they're able to have access to a computer, then they can do the online. And they have to have an email address. And of course, email's free now, so.
Gosh, that's amazing. I remember when I used to work for Arlington County, it used to take 6 months to fill a position.
Yeah, we're trying to get away from that.
I'm serious, it really did. It was just unbelievable, half a year.
Yeah.
Where did the workers' compensation problem, how did that, is this sort of just a spike that?
No, actually it is not a spike. When we first started with IWIF, the Injured Workers Insurance Fund, we didn't have any experience. So what the insurance companies do is they start you out at a 1.0 modification.
I understand that.
Right. Now that we have been with them for a while and we have experience, now we're getting hit with the numbers. So that's why there was a spike from 1.0 to 1.26. And we have had claims this year, and unfortunately I can only really speak for this year, and I think we may see an increase for FY15 because of what's happening in this fiscal year, but we have had claims where people have been out for an extended amount of time. So part of what the safety committee is also going to be doing is developing some better and I think more flexible light duty positions for employees. So for example, if someone that is in Public Works and they work on the recycle and the refuse collection truck, and they've got a bad knee. Well, it's going to be a little difficult for them to be able to jump up and down and grab that stuff and put it into the truck. So we may have some other options in other areas where they'll be able to do work, but just not their normal work until they're released by their physician.
I see.
So it's going to be a pretty aggressive program, but it will significantly decrease the cost of workers' comp.
Yeah.
And it does take time.
It'll pay for itself.
Yeah, it will. It will.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The benefit of being later in the agenda, fewer questions.
Is that the benefit to coming later?
Thank you.
So why don't you cover the non-departmental budget? We can kind of do it jointly because some of this is not really in your category, but you got to fill out the sheet, so.
All righty, non-departmental.
And right up front was the workers' compensation
Right,
costs that are
workers' comp.
underestimated already, so we have we'll go back around with that.
So I don't really need to readdress the workers' comp. We're looking at an increase for the budget for FY14 to be about $162,000 higher than what it was for FY13. And the reason for that has a lot to do with the increase in the city grants and, of course, the increase in workers' comp. With the increase in workers' comp, if we leave it as it is now with the actual quote that we have, we're looking at twice the 162, so it'll be more like 320 that we're looking at.
In terms of other items, we've got the items that we've been trying to do each year, the city supplement to the state homeowners property tax credit. We have the large community grant program that the council's going to need to discuss how to divide up that $125,000 or adjust that amount if you want to save money or spend more money. There is the established general contingency account. We have a supplemental emergency assistance services that Sarah spoke about, the assistance to the Crossroads Community Food Network, Farm and Table Program of $20,000, the Tacoma Park Independence Day Committee for $15,000, employee training, which is kind of a standard amount of $10,000, the Folk Festival assistance of $10,000, and a standard tuition reimbursement amount of $5,000. I think these are fairly standard amounts for most of these things. We have tried to assist the various festivals. The Celebrate Tacoma Festival is actually in the recreation budget, but we've also supported that. If there's any questions about any of these items? I think
Councilmember Mail.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I don't recall whether we had a contingency account last year, but if we did we use it?
Oh, I'm sorry?
It's required by the charter.
It's required by the charter, but we don't use it. Is that right? It just sits there?
We use it.
Oh, we do use it.
You.
Oh, actually, yes, we have been spending some. We have been spending some. There was some in the budget amendment, and I think we've got about $16,000 left in that for this current year.
Similar amount previous year?
Yes.
It's based on a half a percentage of whatever the revenues are for the general fund.
Is that 0.5% required by charter?
Yes. Yeah.
Specifically in the general fund.
Yes, it's a charter requirement.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, and item 5 is communications budget, and there's lots of interest in this. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the highlights. For the past few years, as this auditorium got renovated and activities picked up, we've gotten to the point where we have a very full schedule of activities here and around the building that require audiovisual assistance or are videoed for city TV. And then there's the festivals that we cover and other kinds of things. We have not, for a while, we were increasing each year, and things were changing, and we were getting used to the spaces, and we had a variety of part-time folks and some specialized contract staff that would do different kinds of activities, and we didn't know what would be a stable expectation. We're now at the point where we've kind of averaging about 6,500 hours of work by people other than Alvaro dealing with city TV, and we cannot continue to do that with a combination of part-time staff. We have, for a variety of legal reasons, we really do need to either create full-time positions, and I think 2 full-time positions is appropriate, with the remainder being kind of the isolated part-time and contract staff for special events when you need more staff. And the current amount of staffing is covered by the past amount of the communications operating grant that we've received, but the increased pay rate that we will need to pay even the part-time and contract staff based on the interest on upholding the living wage provisions for independent contractors starts to exceed the amount of our old amount. If we are able to go to the larger cable grant for operating expenses, we will easily cover the amount of the communications budget. In fact, so much so that we'll have several $200,000 approximately that we can devote to some other things, like some of the IT expenses that are related to cable television. I do believe that we must create the full-time positions, or we would need to restrict the numbers of activities that we do in this facility, simply to adhere to labor law. We will be continuing with the cable franchise negotiations, as we've discussed, and we'll be doing that in communication with you. My guess is it's going to take several months for us to work that out. For the next year, we'll be refining the new website. We're down to working out a bug on the current website that seems fairly minor, of Drupal clashing with our Google Calendar system. That seems to be resolved. This weekend, we switch over with the it's the GovQA, MyTKPK kind of connection to the new report a problem will be switched over this weekend so that we have some new functionality there, and that'll be available even starting next week. If we are able to do the items that we have on our checklist, we should be live with the new website by the second week of May. That does build in some time for resolving these glitches with the calendar system and the Drupal operating system. What we would like to do in the next fiscal year is, as we refine the new website, so that as we see things that seem to need to be more functional based on the user, what we see with the various metrics, we'll want to have more reliance and interest in developing some mobile applications, and that will be kind of a nice idea. In terms of capital projects related to communication, the data center that Abel spoke about is a key provision and is the major item that is listed for use of the cable capital grant funds. We may have some other funds that we want to spend, and we'll come back to you. Partly it comes down to some of the results that come out of the Comcast negotiations about how we can move to HDTV for all of our services, and there's some programming things that come with that. We very much like to have, through the Comcast negotiations, have viewership measured, have the city activities on the city TV channel actually on your menu when you go to your TV, so you can see what's on. A variety of things that need to be done via the negotiations with through the cable franchise negotiations. I think those are the highlights. If there's some, I'm sure there'll be some questions.
I have one general question. On the first page of the communications budget, the note at the bottom says department FTEs do not include part-time staff.
Yes,
How come?
we have, for a variety of reasons in the past, which I disagree with, but they existed, the part-time staff were really used sporadically. For several years, it was, you had a festival, so you'd call in some people, and you had, we certainly did the council meetings, but there was a lot of variability in how we used city TV staff. And so there had not been a tradition of counting the hours of time of part-time and contract staff. And so unlike the recreation department that has
Where we
estimates
added in
of,
all the
right,
part-time.
we've got every little, type of concept of hours of part-time staff that come in for programs. We've not done that in the past with the communications and with City TV. I've always thought that was a problem, but it's just not been something that was kept.
So that the addition of the 2 FTEs in this budget is, in fact, shouldn't really reflect that way in the FTEs. It should
That's
be,
correct.
a more accurate measurement might be if we knew what the part-time was, that it was not really a change.
That's right. And I think that when you look at the number of hours in the past 2 years, it looks very close to about 6,500 hours of combined either part-time or contract staff annually for City TV for the past 2 years. So I think that's
6,500 just for part-time and contract.
correct.
Wow.
So, you're talking 3 full-time equivalents with that. What I'm trying to do at this point is take that to 2 full-time equivalents and then have the flexibility with the specialized, when you do a festival and you need, 10 people, or you have some special skill that you need to have a contract professional in for some kind of a production that we don't normally do. So that's the approach that I'm taking to this. And I'm not intending on increasing the number of hours of actual activity. I don't think you can possibly, actually. I think we're booked.
And so that 6,500 is per year.
That's correct.
Councilmember Schultz.
Maybe I'm getting a hint as to the answer to this question, because when I looked at the departmental summary and I saw what you're trying to do, I was looking to see a comparable drop somewhere in there for contract fees that we would have been paying, so that while something was moving to people who are collecting W-2s, up, in other words, under the wage line, that goes up. But I was looking for a comparable drop elsewhere in the expenses, and I don't see it.
I did my best at estimating this, and I think there actually will be more of a drop in the services and charges line, which is where some of our contract staff is. There's right now, the average that we pay is $12 an hour, and for contractors, it's over $13 an hour for the living wage. And so we are going to need to upgrade those kinds of payments. We also, as we go through our workers' comp stuff, our part-time, employees and that kind of thing, we always have to cover them. So we'll be looking at all of these kinds of expenses. To me, the last 2 years in dealing with the City TV staff has been a bit of a learning curve, because we keep trying to change it to see what seems to work and what meets labor law. And I think we're getting there, but I would be very interested to see what the numbers are next year. I think the amounts will go down for those contract staff, but
They should.
we're just going to have to monitor it quarter by quarter.
Councilmember Romeo.
Thank you. I made a comment earlier about staffing levels, and I make the same comment again now. Particularly when we talked at length with residents last year about offering $650,000 of property tax relief. Simply the optics of having a budget that adds this many new positions and does not propose to provide them that property tax relief is a big concern to me. I'd like to get information between now and whenever we next meet on the use of this room that you spoke of.
Yes.
A description of how often it's used, what it's used for. I'm also interested in whether, for example, a $5,000 grant to Historic Tacoma to allow the use of Historic Tacoma's facilities for many events that are otherwise held here couldn't be a far more cost-effective way to deal with many functions.
Sure, and I do have that information. I've gotten some information from Sarah on breaking down day by day, the use of this room, and I will share that with you. We get about $16,000 a year in revenue from renting this room. Renting the room is not the primary use of the room, just in terms of numbers of hours. Lots of community things that we do for free, so we don't get the rental income, but we do have the staffing requirements. One of the things that is nice about this room that may not be as easy for the Historic Tacoma or some of the other locations is we do have the built-in cameras, so we have some flexibility if something needs to be recorded.
My concern is that comes at a big cost. Recording, whether it's necessary to record something or whether it's nice to record something, whether the city has to do it or whether the person who's hosting the function could do it. I'm also just curious in terms, and I don't need a response to it now, but when I had inquired about an event last year, it was going to require a fee, and so I'm just not sure of the city's process with regard to when a fee is waived and when a fee is not waived.
I sent out information to the council about 3 weeks ago, Terry. I'll forward that to you. It's got all of the specifications on that. One of the things I do want to make clear in looking at FTEs and budget and impact on residents, which I'm always very sensitive about, is that the cable operating grants can't be spent on tax rebates. They can't be spent on other staff that aren't cable related. So it's one of these things where we do have money for these purposes that are targeted and are able to be used completely flexibly.
And I get that, but people often don't care.
I understand.
Money is money. Their money is their money. They like to see service that they prioritize over services they don't prioritize.
Right. And I will say one of the things that I hear a lot is real excitement about having a lot of our activities online and on television. The opportunity to be able to link to an event from our website and send the link to somebody is very prized by many of the people who either do performances here or see their kids in an event here. And we end up with so much goodwill and positive press, kind of word of mouth from that. I'm very pleased with that. I think you'll find when you talk with folks that that's something that's very valued.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. So what happens if we don't transition these people that are part-timers or contract employees into city employees? Do we just get rid of them?
What we would need to do is reduce the numbers of hours of activity because there's a certain amount that you can't use employees like this, and so we would have to reduce the number of hours, and that would reduce the number of hours that they would work.
And we would reduce the number of activities. Do we know what the impact would be on the revenues that we receive?
I would hope that we would be smart enough to reduce the activities that we don't get revenues for, but those are often valued community events, so we'd have to look at that.
Okay, because I would like to see that, because I have to join my colleague, Councilmember Mayo. I mean, people are going to ask, well, you guys are going to hire all these employees.
We already have them, and we are paying for them out of cable grant monies.
Right, but
I understand it looks
I
very
know
difficult.
what my constituents are going to say.
Yeah.
You're going to hire people, but I still have a trash problem.
Mhm.
Why can't that get solved? But we can hire people. So I just would like to make sure that we move very slowly hiring people.
Mhm.
If we don't have to, we don't hire. Because it's a difficult conversation.
I understand.
But the conversation we have to have is that they're already here, they just haven't been counted in.
And
The work-
they haven't been compensated correctly,
Right.
and so we do need to do that.
And so it's not necessarily a question of hiring somebody new, it's a question of transitioning people who are already here.
Budget goes up by $120,000.
Right.
That's not a dollar increase in living wage.
No, but there's also benefits that haven't been paid.
It's still not $120,000.
Yeah.
I think we were successful with regard to the speed camera fund when we were building sidewalks or budgeting for sidewalks, budgeting for them 2 years ago and building them a year ago in 2012, that constituents were able to understand that this is money that was in the speed camera fund, that it could only be used for public safety purposes. And at the time, we had money flowing in a good volume of dollars flowing in. And we understood that it would have been unwise to allocate all those funds for positions, and so we also saw the need for sidewalks. And we built those sidewalks with the money, so we made that hay while the sun shone, so to speak. Now we don't have the money going forward, but my point is that with cable money, it's almost the same situation as with speed camera money. And I think when you explain things to constituents, and you say, well, we have this pot of money, it can only be used for X. If we don't use it for X, we can't spend it.
That's right.
And so I don't see why it should be very difficult to explain to our voters, constituents, that it's the same thing with this cable money. So we might as well use it.
Because we have how much sitting in cable capital money that,
We have $1.6 million sitting in an account for capital. We can spend some of that, but what we can't spend it on is what we really need, which is to pay our staff and to pay for the ongoing maintenance and small equipment that doesn't count as capital. I'm hopeful that if the negotiations are successful and we get the cable grant operating money, that it gives us a lot more comfort about how we handle this. Even if that money does not get negotiated that way, I do think we do need to do something about these positions. I'm very hopeful that the negotiations will be able to be successful. But it is something that, from a legal standpoint, I think we have a certain set of information here that we have to deal with.
No, I agree with you that we do, and I see that it's important that we keep these people on. I don't have any problems with that at all, but I do want to agree one point with Councilmember Mayo, and that is with regard to that $650,000. I feel that we have a moral kind of obligation to reduce our expenses, which is to say our tax rate, in proportion to that kind of money. It may not amount to much on the tax rate, but I think Councilmember Mail is hitting the nail very sharply on the head here, because a year ago, when we were budgeting, we said, well, there's too many unknowns. We don't know what we're going to do, so we'll defer some decisions until January of 2013. And people were saying, well, some of the $650,000 should come back to the constituents and just not go into the general fund. And I think that's something that I feel we need to pay very close attention to as we work this budget through.
And I agree, and I think one place that we're doing that is if we keep the tax rate at 58 cents rather than raising it to 60.2 cents at the
Constant yield rate.
constant yield rate. That is, I think, $276,000 that we are not collecting that we would be collecting. And so I think we've gone partway there, and we need to look for other places to address that.
I agree.
Are we ready to call it an evening?
Can I just point out the item 6 real quick in your package?
Item 6.
You can point to it.
I have responded to all but one of the questions that was raised in the last budget work session. I will continue to do that. And I did provide the information that I had emailed you to before, which talked about the full-time equivalents and explained them. The total net increase that is proposed in this budget is 5.53 FTEs. 2.5 of the FTEs are to be funded with the cable operating grants. I have 2.19 FTEs for Sunday hours in the library, computer learning center, and community center. I will provide more detailed information about that, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty close to that amount for the Sunday hours. As I mentioned, the halftime position that I'm proposing in the city manager's office for service to seniors, I consider a contract 2-year position. And in terms of ongoing tax-based FTEs, there would be the hours for the Sunday service and the halftime position for emergency management coordination that was discussed in November for the police department. So those are the areas where there's ongoing FTEs proposed from tax money. So, thank you very much.
Just one it's a minor comment, and I think the answer is the same, but with regard to the answer provided on the fringe costs differing by division in the police department, my question was actually across all city departments, so that the fringe costs differ within division within the police department, but also between police department and rec, et cetera. I'm assuming it's the same answer. If there's follow-up needed, that's great, but I expect that's what you confirm, but I was just curious about that.
Yes, and sometimes, it really does go by the person. The worksheet that Alexis spends lots of time with really goes person by person in which division and calculates out the fringes. It can differ because somebody's got family coverage for insurance, or there's a different kind of situation that because of the position, and so it's one of those things where it does look strange, especially if positions move between the divisions.
Thank you.
Councilor Siemens, you get the last word.
Hi, thank you. Well, it's, I think maybe longer word than what you're hoping for. Because
then you don't get it.
Well, I saw this item on the agenda, and so I've waited for 2 weeks for this to get here.
Yes.
It does say identification of potential reconciliation items, and there were a couple of items that I did want to add to our reconciliation discussion. One of those is a subject that I brought up several weeks ago when we were talking with the Housing Department about code enforcement, and specifically about the enforcement of the codes on some of the problem properties where properties have gone into, single-family homes have gone into significant disrepair. And I discussed at that time my desire to see us use not just an enforcement approach, but to use, because many in many cases that I've seen of these situations, there are hardships in the owners that I think could be addressed in a more positive way. And so I would like to add to our reconciliation discussion $20,000 for, and I don't know what the right word is, I listed as an advocate for the owners. I don't think that's the right word. It's because what I'm asking for is someone that would work with the owner in a less threatening way to try to assist the owner in addressing the maintenance issues, and recognizing someone with the skills that recognizes that in many cases there are some psychological issues possibly, and not necessarily that the person is psychologically challenged, but that the issue itself can be intimidating to some people, and that the person would work to find a resolution to the problem in a non-threatening way. Okay. And the second item that I wanted to add, and I know that some people have said that a city the size of Tacoma Park shouldn't be doing social services, and I would say that a city of 5 people should be assisting one of the family members if they are struggling to be at the same level as others. And so I talk with several of the young adults in our community who are sometimes having to be addressed by the resources of our police department. But as I talk with them, a common thread I find with the young people is a need for a job. And I would like us to put $20,000 in the budget targeted for vocational training. And I don't know, I would certainly leave that up to you as far as whether that came under the recreational department or the housing and community development. And it's, at this point, not specific as far as exactly how that money would be used. I think there are programs, though, that are available that we could participate in with the addition of some funds. And I think my personal opinion is that in the long run, it saves us money in the enforcement arena. Thank you.
Is that another light?
It is.
You want the...
Let me ask a process-related question first. I have a number of other items, reconciliation items, that I would want to propose at some point. I don't have to do them tonight. I can identify them by writing, so they're added to a list. I just want to make sure that there's a time to get them out.
And the intention was to get to them tonight, but I figured it got so late. I think, why don't we put a short agenda item on Monday's meeting for reconciliation? It's there, but maybe we move it up so we don't always do it late and then not do it.
Happy to have that. I'll have a, the kind of chart that we keep
So we'll have that
identifying
list
these.
and we can look at that and see what we want to add to it.
And I don't know if it's better for people to send them to me or if they should be all presented in open session. I kind of think presenting them in open session makes a little bit more sense, but I don't know. So I think it might be up to you all what you prefer.
I think it's good to have them put out there in open session, added to the list, and then we get to a point where we start to discuss the whole thing, but we don't want to be starting in discussing the list when it's only partially formed.
And I'm happy, though, I asked Tim for some of his ideas. I'm happy to hear any of your ideas, too, because if there's something that I need to do kind of to research them or think about them a little bit, it's useful. Even though I'd like you to talk about them in open session, I'm also encouraging you to send them to me by email, and so I understand.
And my intent was to lay it on the table, and then we can talk.
Great.
Okay. And you had said that if there was anything that was provided tonight or tomorrow, that you might have a chance to work on it.
Right, and it's very helpful, especially, I've taken a couple notes of pieces of information that people wanted. If there's some other things that since you didn't have a lot of time to look at this information, if there are things that come to you for the Friday and Saturday, send me an email, and I'll try to get them as part of answers for the next, for Monday.
Yeah. The thought was we were going to have more time for reconciliation this evening.
I didn't control the meeting.
We're adjourned.